Hello, everyone. Welcome to Saturday evening of Gen Con Online here at Huetopia. This panel is Everything is a Remix, creating your own original TTRPG system by picking apart the pieces that you like from other systems. Today, we are joined by 5 beautiful, wonderful, brilliant game designers. I'm a teeny tiny window because I don't design games yet, but I would like to help organize these very bouncy beans and keep their thoughts on track. So I'm Jess, these they them pronouns. I will be monitoring chat while I direct these beans. So if you have questions, type question, : question. And Imani, who are you? Where can we find you?
Hi, I'm Imani. You can find me at mcatterdev on Twitter, marketcatter on itch.io, marketcattertv on twitch.tv. I make games and I do game dev stuff on Twitch. I'm currently working on one of my 2 Magnus Opus. But are you allowed to have 2 of those, or is that a one-shot deal?
You do now.
Well, I have 2. One is a game about giant robots and magical girls, and the other one is a game that I keep pitching to anyone who will listen to me about a VR virtual novel.
Yes.
A VR visual novel. Sorry, that's the.
Yeah. Oh, okay, got it.
Same thing.
Great. Ajey, how are you? Where can we find you?
My name is Ajey. I use he/him pronouns. I am at Ajey Pandey on Twitter. I am one of the people posting a lot about the tabletop chop shop. I am the main writer of the Bolt RPG system, the quote-unquote lightning fast RPG built for hacking. It's real fun. It's all I talk about. It's a real party.
It is. You make it sound very interesting, and I am a crunch terrified person. Viditya!
Hi, I'm Viditya. I use he/him pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at VidityaValidity. You can buy and peruse my wonderful games at vidityavalidity.itch.io. And I also have a Twitch where I do a bunch of different things at twitch.tv/VidityaValidity. It's all the same. You can find me all over under the same thing.
Branding is consistency. That's good.
Branding is good. Yeah.
Simon?
Hello, my name is Simon, and I wear a lot of hats on the internet. You can find me on Twitter at Lucha Libris, where I talk about the intersection of board games, tabletop games, and social justice. I am a tabletop game designer. You can find some of my games at colorspraygames.itch.io, which some of which you may already own if you bought the Itch bundle for racial justice and equality. I am also a LARPwright. I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Enkindle Storytelling, which is a LARP company in the greater Boston area dedicated to socially responsible game design with a heavy focus on narrative. You can learn more about our current project, Attaway LARP, at attawaylarp.com. I'm a professional GM. I work for the Magpie Games curated play program currently, and have been since its inception. I'm very excited to keep going and run some Root coming up in the next month. And I'm also a voice actor for the Penumbra Podcast, which is a queer sci-fi and fantasy audio drama. If you want to see yourself represented in stories, you can learn more about that at thepenumbrapodcast.com.
Holy crap. I think each and every one of us, that's how you're game designers, staying busy. Last but certainly not least, Austin.
Hey guys, Austin McKenzie, he/him pronouns as well. I created Valor, which is generally intended to create sort of shonen, seinen, action comedy RPGs, and that as with Ajay, that's pretty much all I talk about and all I work on in my free time, and all that I spend my money on. So it's a good time. You can find me at valorgames.com or at Valor Austin on Twitter, where I generally fail to use the platform because I'm bad at social media.
Social media is very hard.
Social media is just the hardest.
Making it work for you. Yeah, from a marketing perspective, it's a challenge. It's a job in and of itself. So I'm looking at this document that y'all made together, and the tagline is it's a perfect intro. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Creating your own original RPG system by hacking other systems till you get something you love. Imani, roll us off. Get that convo started.
Okay, hold on. One second.
Oh, my bad. It was your original pitch panel. I just wanted to give you the spotlight.
No, it's fine. I'm also, so someone asked me what I was doing right this minute, and I was just like, oh, here, how am I doing?
Yes.
I had to like quickly throw that into a Slack channel. Anyway,
Always
so
be plugging.
I'm plugging our panel. So everything is, so here's the thing. I said this on a bunch of other panels that I've been on. I'll say it again on this panel. I had no original idea in my entire goddamn life. The title of this panel is literally stolen from a YouTube video that's 10 years old. But I'm not even sorry. There's no such thing as an original concept in anything ever. Everything is basically just a remix of another thing that someone else did, except for Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley had one original idea, and it was the best original idea ever. And it's called Frankenstein. Everyone else has been lying since then.
I was about to steal a line from Frankenstein, but
I like it. Okay. Quick and easy question then. How did you get started into the game design rather than just hacking someone else's system or like GMing other people's system? What made you make your own game?
Me, personally?
Yeah.
POC and TTRPG threw out a gauntlet, was just like, here, have a tropes jam. And I went, I could do that. And then I did.
Yeah.
And then I did. I spent 20 days writing a game that's like 40 pages long, which is House of Press, which was the first game that I made. I just never stopped. It was bad. It's fine.
It's really good.
What about the boys?
The boys.
Well,
I'm just staring at the he, him pronouns. I'm like, the boys.
The boy collective. It's like the
boy.
Mm-hmm. The he.
Mostly boy.
Yeah.
That's true. My bad. Gender is fucked.
Gender is indeed a fuck.
I can jump up. So I'm a fancy boy who got a degree in game design.
Really?
Yeah, it did. It's fun. I'll throw it around. I spent too much money and too much time not to throw that degree around.
Yeah.
So boy, was that a hellscape of 5 years.
Sorry, where'd you go to school at? Tell me more.
Sure, yeah. Well, I went to school at the Maryland Institute College of Art, MICA, in Baltimore, Maryland. I went to an art school. It was really great. I
too went to art school.
Yeah, hell yeah. I genuinely loved my education of learning game design in art school, especially because I also met people from Johns Hopkins who were taking game design classes, and I'm like, oh, we are learning vastly different concepts. And I love my concepts a lot more because I'm thinking more about play first versus production. And there's a bunch of small things. Not to say my education makes me a better game designer or anything like that, but that's kind of where a lot of stuff started. My game design started with my first role-playing game was 3.5, D&D 3.5. I did a little campaign of that with some friends, and then I moved into Pathfinder, and Pathfinder was what I knew and what I taught a bunch of my friends in college until I went, wow, I kind of hate Pathfinder. There's things I like about Pathfinder, but I don't want to be playing it. And so I started writing up my own little, what would now, I learned later, be considered a heartbreaker. It's really cool. Woo! I wrote and it kind of spiraled from there. I got some really great advice early on just about game design, about what I was trying to think about with these games, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I took what I knew about Pathfinder, and then I read up some other tabletop games. I know Grant Howitt's one-page games were pretty influential for me because it was the first time I was like, wait, a game can be a page? Oh shit, it could be 2 rules and a fun animal doing a crime. Nice. And it's been history since then. I just am constantly trying to change up and figure out what are games and what game can be. So yeah.
Life meta. What are a game?
Look, I don't make games. I make ideas.
Yeah, I think as y'all are introducing how you got into game design, it definitely leans into the first couple topics of original system from scratch versus original system using an existing system as the base. Like Viditya said, started out with Pathfinder, didn't like it. Try something else. Something, lasers and feelings, right?
Hey. Blazes and Thrones is so good.
Yeah.
It is very good.
We learned a lot. Simon.
Yeah, for me, I also, like most people, really cut my teeth on gaming with third edition Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, my first gaming experience of all time was playing a little RPG called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness, written by Palladium Games, which is like, as a 10-year-old coming into role playing for the first time, probably not the most optimal choice. But there were cool kids at summer camp that were like, "Hey, come play this game. We need someone. You can be Donatello. Here's his character sheet." And I was
Man, what
over the
kids
moon.
at summer camp
right?
are playing Palladium? Jesus.
Intense ones, really intense ones.
Oh, dorks.
They were older kids, they were like 14, so obviously they could wrap their
Oh.
brains around mega damage and everything. But I starting from there and like going, okay, well this is too much. Let me like work my way into other games. I kind of fell out of it and then came back into it. But game design itself didn't happen until college, when one of my local game stores started carrying a couple of shelves of I would say like the first wave of what I would call the modern indie scene, where like I walked in and here's a game called Dogs in the Vineyard, and you're sort of like playing Mormon ghost hunters. What's this about? And so I bought that, and then I came back and I picked up like the Shab al-Hiri Roach, which is like a send up of academia and the Cthulhu mythos. Shock, social science fiction. All of these really weird games that were doing completely different things with the medium, aside from you are a party of adventurers, or you are a coterie of vampires, or you are a group of like space baddies going out and doing odd jobs. Like, oh, you can do a game where the whole play is a series of vignettes of different characters. Oh, you can have a game where like nobody has a character, where you're all playing various characters. This is really interesting. So I tried my hand at that. And didn't go anywhere like beyond it, but it opened my mind to thinking like, oh, I can make games, because there are play experiences that I'm realizing I want to see that just aren't there. So what if I made those things that I wanted to see? As I went on, I sort of developed. I fell into the LARP scene in New England, where I live and I do most of my work, and most of the games in my area work on a very combat heavy boffer model, where you go out in the woods, everyone has fake swords, and you hit each other, and sometimes you say a number and that's how much damage you do, or you have to say an incant to throw a birdseed packet at somebody, and like with mystic force I bind you and you throw a packet and that person is rooted in place. I started running a game in that model because it's what was available, and over the course of the 6 years of that campaign I realized this is not something that I want to try and iterate on it. So we continuously pushed the boundaries of, can we take this system from another game that we like and put it into a live action context? How does that work? Can we translate this tabletop mechanic? Can we go to other LARPs and see what we can borrow? So we were constantly, that game was basically just always being hot patched every session with like new rules or changes, which is hard to do. But that kind of opened my mind to being able to look at multiple systems and try and jam them together into a new context. And so my current goal with this, like the reason that I continue game design, is I want to make games that have mechanics that reinforce that theme, like a theme. When you're writing a game, do you need a fighter, a wizard, and a rogue, or are you putting that in the game because that is what convention says you need? If you're running like Takuma Okada's Stew Pot, you don't need a big punch warrior. You don't need a like fireball throwing wizard. You need chefs. You need herbalists, right? It's a different theme of your game. And so I wanted to look at making games that have those rules that reinforce the stories that I'm interested in telling.
It was that last point was really important to me, because it's like, oh, for me I was like, okay, well, an RPG has like AC and feats, and when somebody, or like, I was just playing around and I'm like, well, I don't really want to use AC and feats, like on a mechanical level. And I was like, well, wait, what do you know? There are RPGs out there that don't do that.
What?
That's cool. Yeah.
I still have to talk myself down from that. Every time I make a game, I have to talk myself down from putting in feats. Like every time. It's like
Sometimes you
they're
don't need
right
feats.
there.
Yeah. You only need 2, unless you got more. That's my joke. That's my feat joke.
Stop.
I was
Get out.
gonna ignore it. I was gonna ignore it. Because I hadn't heard it.
This is why we're lucky Jess isn't actually in the room with us, because they would just beat the crap out of us.
Oh my
and
God.
divine
100%.
punishment.
Ugh. Is that
Only
part of the
Viditya.
game design requirement? Puns? Terrible
Yes.
puns?
Yes.
Punches are.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
Where do you think so many great game design ideas just come from puns?
It hurts so bad.
True,
I will
yeah.
recognize its brilliance, but it hurts so bad.
Like every Laces and Feelings hack is just a pun on itself, right? Isn't that the
Mine
thing?
wasn't.
No.
Which lasers and
Okay.
feelings hack did you do, AJ?
I did one called Pain and Regrets.
I'm not
Okay.
prepared.
Sure.
Lord, tell us.
When I
Oh, we
played
got
it once,
Red. Hello, Red.
What's
Sorry.
up?
Big Raid.
Hello.
well, hello to the Saving Throw show. Party of freaking 50.
In case you didn't know who Saving Throw Show is, what are you even doing? They are professional TTRPG streamers creating brilliant games, and we really appreciate them. I think Mariam had gotten to be on a panel with some of the beans. Oh, hello, Zinabody voice.
They can't. The audience can't hear them.
Oh, that's true. Dang it. Okay, fine.
Hear
Mariam's
Mariam-
here
Mariam either.
secretly, but Mariam's here, and Mariam loves Saving Throw Show. We love it, Saving Throw Show, and thank you super much for the raid. Back to game design. Austin and Ajay, I don't think we've gotten to touch
You want to
base
go first,
on.
Austin?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. I talked about this a bit in earlier panel, but I can definitely expand on it. I played a lot of JRPGs when I was little, and around early high school, after I'd spent like the entirety of elementary school being like, I'm gonna be a novelist, I'm gonna write a book, and never have to work in an office or anything like that. And consistently failing to write more than like a chapter of a novel, I just started designing what I would later find out is role-playing games before I even knew what D&D was, besides the fact that I knew it existed. So I just started making these games kind of based off of these JRPGs I would play and like the Dragonlance books that I really loved. And then I found out that D&D existed, which was like, oh wow, someone's made this thing. So obviously this professional product is going to be perfect and it's going to do, everything I want to do with it. And
Narrator voice.
and then yes, it wasn't. I did try to do the Bleach anime in the D20 system, and it did work generally. Apparently, like people carried it on for many years thereafter, and you can still find the rules, which is baffling to me. But that's cool.
So I have you to
but
blame for that. Or thank, I guess.
blame is fine. I will accept that lodestone. But I always just really enjoyed making mechanics and adapting what I'd seen into these kinds of games. And eventually I decided, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make this game and it'll be cool. And then I think at the time it was like, maybe Wizards of the Coast will hire me or something like that. And whereas now I'm just like, no, I'm gonna do it on my own. I'm gonna have my own company with like a budget where I can pay people, and I'm working on that. But indie for life, I guess.
Doing a beautiful job. It's hard to knock life out there. And Jen, why are you doing this? Why are you even here?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Why am I here? So I am Baby. I have never played 3.5 in my life. I started
don't
with
have
5e. And very quickly got into the habit of homebrewing stuff. So like my favorite gimmick was making like Bloodborne style trick weapons out of D&D mechanics. Because I don't know, I like weird crunchy combat mechanics, and often if you're playing a martial class in D&D, you don't get enough options in terms of how to approach things.
But hey, attack and full attack. What else do you need?
Multi-attack.
What if
Multi-attack.
you had a weapon that could swap between a bard musical instrument and then a short sword and shield?
Why not have it do both at the same time, though?
Ooh.
I love hunting horn.
Yeah, I was about to say. Oh man,
I think
love
that lends in perfectly to the biggest meat part of the Everything is a Remix panel in terms of when you are. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What else? Tell me more, BB.
But yeah, at some point, I got tired of D&D, and I was introduced to this game called Genesis, which is the genericized version of the Star Wars FFG system. And I was just like, holy shit, this is wild. This weird dice mechanic is incredible. I love this shit. So I got into making a Genesis hack, like a whole setting hack with a couple of like custom mechanics, custom weapons, yada yada yada. With the hopes of like, hey, maybe Fantasy Flight will put together like a good license for me to like sell this game, because that would be rad. And then they did, and it was shit. Like full on, like they tried to copy DM's Guild, complete with like intellectual property fuckery and like rent-seeking, skimming cash off of my work. And I'm just like, nah, hard pass. I want to write a thing where if I write it, I want to be able to write a novel on top of it. Without lawyers. So I was like, screw your proprietary dice. I'm gonna make my own theme park with blackjack. So I did, and that's like 10 months ago. So now I've written a goddamn D10 bullshit game that's like written largely out of spite. It was written out of spite.
It's a powerful motivator. Spite is an amazing motivator.
It's an amazing motivator. I called it a heartbreaker for a long time, and then people actually liked the game, and it's like, well, this isn't breaking my heart. This doesn't work.
Try harder.
It's a heart starter, a full hearter.
It's a different blade.
Heart filler.
Like that.
A heart filler. There we go.
Hey!
Let's
And
start.
that right
lighter.
there, that's beautiful. Like that's how you game design. You riff off of each other.
That's what it
it.
is.
There you are.
riff
You've
off of
remixed
each other.
it.
Oh my god!
And
I
then
want
you
this.
Look at
this
Valor,
camp.
and you're like, wait, we did the same thing in a couple places.
Yeah, it's independent creativity can sometimes lead you down the exact same road.
Yeah, like I said, there's no such thing as an original thought. We all share one brain cell. We just don't know it sometimes.
All right, so here's the spiciest part of this panel. Creating an original system using an existing system as the base. So I want to hear. I'm going to open up the floor to all of you. Tell me about what mechanics, what bits and parts rustle your jimmies.
The combat system from Bolt is stolen from Cyberpunk 2020. I just stole the vibe from Cyberpunk 2020. In terms of like the way,
I don't know this.
At least in terms of like the tone, because what happened with Cyberpunk 2020, and I can like pull out the book if I really wanted to. It literally starts with not like here's how you shoot. It's like, listen, we're pulling this off of like kind of realism of like you probably don't know how to use the gun you're holding. You're going to be within incredibly short ranges. And when you get shot, it's going to wreck you the first time. You know, like the power fantasy, you get shot twice. And like that sort of like quick, fast, dangerous combat style turned into Bolt. Where the difference is that I didn't slow down combat with hit location detection and fumbles. And like shotgun spreads and like checking ranges. So, but the core idea of how I wanted to design the combat system for Bolt was driven from Cyberpunk 2020. A lot of the core resolution system and like the skill list was based out of Cyberpunk 2020. Like the perk complication system is me trying to riff on Genesis, but like with like faster resolution, whereas Genesis is very much like a slow read the bones type game. And then a couple moves got stolen from PBTA. So it's a nice hefty mix.
Yep. No, I steal dice mechanics from Fate, not from Fate, from Forge in the Dark all the time, from Blaze in the Dark. I straight up just you did the math. I'm not doing it over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Steal math. Math is hard.
Math is hard, and I'm not good at it. I have an art degree, okay? I have a fancy film and television degree. I don't do math. I just trust.
See,
I
Imani,
went to
this is why I
school for
partnered with
engineering,
a,
and I still don't do
programmer.
math.
Huh? What are you saying, Allison?
This is why I partnered with the programmer, because they were the ones who did
I do
our
program.
actual probability distribution, because they're good at numbers.
I will do programming when I write visual novels. I do branching paths. I don't do math. I avoid math in every way, shape, or form that I can avoid math. But for me, I stole the dice mechanics from Forge in the Dark. I heavily lean on the background mechanics from Pathfinder and like 3.5. And eventually, one day in the future, I'm going to steal the tactics-based combat from 4E. One day, I'm just going to take their tactics system and put it in something else.
Still Lancers. Lancers is very good.
Oh, I steal Lancers as well, because Lancers has giant robots and I have giant robots.
Giant
someone else already
robots.
did the work.
Anime bullshit.
It's good.
Everyone loves mechs.
Who wants to go next?
Well, I was I was gonna tag in, and then Viditya is like, oh, well,
No.
we're kind of doing the humble dance right now.
Yeah, we are.
You're up.
Simon, you
I was
take
gonna
it.
say that the my current, so I have two, I guess, examples. One, a very brief one, is my current project for tabletop gaming is a game called Goblins in Shadow, which is a Forged in the Dark game about goblin revolutionaries trying to overthrow vampiric elves who have colonized their homelands and now built a city on top of their ancestral homeland and drink goblin blood to stay young, and they literally eat gold, and they're eternal, ancient, pale, white creatures. I'm very subtle with my design themes.
Incredibly
You
subtle.
can't see
I
any
didn't
themes,
notice
man. I don't know
symbols
what you're
at
Right,
all.
but you're revolting against this oppressive city state. It's a sort of like a clock punk fantasy setting that's heavily drawing from Assassin's Creed and Thief the Dark Project and Styx Master of Shadows. But that was an idea that sort of came to me in one big brain blast over the course of an hour, a few days before the end of Goblin Week. Earlier this year, and so I was like, I have to put this down. I want to put something out there. What do I use? Blades in the Dark seems pretty good as a basis. Forged in the Dark seems like what I want to do. Thought about the Spire resistance system that Spire uses. Ended up settling on Blades because I pulled up Duam Figueroa's World of Blades, which tries to do for Blades in the Dark what World of Dungeons did for Dungeon World. And so just like, how can we pare this down to its most essential structures? So it's a hack of a hack of a hack, right? It's the sequence is right. You can see the DNA chain. It's still in development, but you can check it out on my Edge page. But that was sort of like taking some mechanics that I thought were fairly easy to reskin, and then change a few core mechanics, like renaming the way that coin works in that game to fervor, which is more about the will of the people and getting getting public support instead of getting paid, because you're revolutionaries. You don't care about making money. You want to win over your fellow goblins who are being oppressed and get them to do things like instill a workers' revolt in the factory district. And then if they happen to redistribute their firearms to you that they used to be making, well, then that's a bonus for everybody, isn't it? My current LARP project, though, is, I think, a bigger scale thing, because it's the idea of marrying a conventional boffer combat game with PBTA sensibilities. How do we take a game structure that is so inherently focused on combat and about where the primary verb is use sword on person, and build a game that really emphasizes social mechanics, social dynamics, and fiction first role playing? That has been an extremely difficult challenge, but one that I've found very rewarding to run for the last 2 years. We used to use, a lot of games in my area use a system called Accelerant, which is very streamlined for most buffer combat games. And for our game, which is 1920s deco punk, where you are bootleggers running magic hooch in a time of prohibition. You're not selling illegal booze. You're selling potions that will temporarily give you superpowers. That kind of setting, we wanted combat to be very quick and terrifying. So the combat system draws a lot of inspiration from the way that Dogs in the Vineyard does sort of an escalation of violence in a game where normally you have hit points and you swing a sword, and one sword strike is 1 hit point. Sometimes a fireball or something is more hit points, and you're calling numbers out. The air in a fight is very heavy, and it's very hard for a lot of people to process. If you imagine being in a field with 10 people and someone's yelling 3 normal, 3 normal, and someone else is yelling 15 silver, and someone else throws a packet and yells fireball, and someone else is like, I heal 3 of your wounds, like your brain just sort of starts to shut down a little bit. That's an accessibility problem for me and for many other people at the game that I wanted to run. So we said, okay, all combat is uncalled damage. You just swing a fist, it's 1 damage. If you get hit with a knife or any melee weapon, it's brutal damage, and it immediately drops you to like a state we call bleeding and crying, which can be for physical and mental damage. And if you get shot, you go into mortal jeopardy, which is like you're gonna die. Because and that means that like when 2 people come up to each other and they have 2 fists, little short swords with red tape over them, so you're like, okay, I've got my boxing gloves on or whatever, right? You know this is a non-lethal fight, and each of you can trade 5 hits back and forth. So we're telegraphing to people visually the stakes. When somebody goes into their boot and pulls out a knife prop, that person immediately is telegraphing to the other player, I am interested in a higher stakes combat. I am willing to drop you, and if you can get this knife away from me, I am interested in you potentially dropping me. If somebody pulls a gun out, that person is saying, I am willing to kill. And that is potentially very, very dangerous considering how lethal death is in this game. Like you can still come back from the brink of death, but we wanted the visual element to be there. So we're kind of borrowing, what if we took that system where like literally you're like raising cards in terms of like going from fist to gun to knife to gun in Dogs in the Vineyard, and put it in a visual format with props. On the terms of like fiction first PBTA, you do it to do it is usually the aesthetic of PBTA. Like to do something, you have to do it in the fiction. You don't say, I want to act under pressure to dodge the bullet. You say, you're being shot at. Okay, I run and I slide underneath the table and I kick the table up so that I can make some cover. Great. It sounds like you were trying to act under pressure. Now we roll the dice because a move is triggered. So we wanted to try and take that kind of like, you do the thing and then there's a move that results in it, or that follows up in terms of the way that we do like social mechanics or other skills. Like when you are holding a weapon, if you are like the heister character class type, if you are holding a gun at somebody and you have the skill, you can unlimitedly at will just yell like, everybody get on the floor, drop your gun, and intimidate them as a social effect constantly. But there's like a narrative trigger that has to happen, so you are setting up the play experience there. For our other character classes, like sub abilities, there are like prestige classes in other games or like in D&D, but to meet those requirements, you have to complete some kind of story beat, like compete in a boxing match or resolve a situation non-violently, or like for the gunslinger, talk about when lethal force is justified. Like it's not just like shoot gun good. It's like you have to understand why you are shooting the gun in the first place to be good at shooting the gun. So like that's sort of some of where my brain has been at, is like, how can we take the fiction first aesthetic, not even necessarily a specific rule set, but a whole ethos, and apply that ethos to a game setup that doesn't normally have that dynamic.
Ooh.
That is.
You
that
just
is
dropped
hype
a
as
lot
hell.
of knowledge on everyone.
I know. I like took notes. I like straight up am like, wait, hold on, let me.
We're all here to learn from each other, right? I'm learning
Yeah.
from everybody else as much as
I
anything
really
else.
I love like the translation of like, okay, I love escalation. How do I change like fictional escalation to physical prop escalation? Fascinating. I love that.
And I'm going back in terms of like, can I steal this idea for Bolt? In terms of like, because like the way the health system works is that a punch, you'll go down in like 4 or 5 punches unless you really pump up vitality, but you'll go down in 2 gunshots. Or 1 if it's a big Zweihander.
Yeah.
So yeah, that like escalation of stakes.
Imani, it looks like you're ready.
Go for
you want
it.
to say something?
No, I was gonna say. So, most of the games that I've made have, with the exception of the idea of combat in Magical Girls and Mecha, I don't do combat. It's all like strictly role play. It's really funny. And I'm like, I should probably figure out how to like implement like escalation of violence and like threat level and threat danger in the games that I make, because it's a game of magical girls and giant robots, and giant robots are fighting things, but it's like, use your words, like describe what like all my games, all the games that I put out, or describe how you do something that is violent.
Yeah,
that has violence
absolutely.
in it at all.
So like pivot. Tell me about how you remix the conflict resolution or narrative mechanics in addition to combat.
Wait, did Austin want to say something?
Yeah, I can definitely talk. It's kind of interesting for me. I come at the design from a bit of a different angle. I guess this is the first time I'll actually publicly admit it to, maybe the one person who might even know what I'm talking about. But we actually took a lot of the core concept and design, not from a tabletop RPG for Valor, but from a long-standing Japan-only video game series known as Super Robot Wars, where the entire conceit is they license like Gundam, Mazinger, Get a Robo, sometimes weird ones. Like I actually just bought one of the Switch games, Super Robot Wars X, which I can now import, and it's in English and it's wonderful, which has Nadia of the Blue Water and Gurren Lagann, and it's fantastic.
Excuse me?
Wait, no,
we're gonna have to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that would be Super Robot Wars X for the Nintendo Switch, which is region free and available in English. I will definitely look up a link in a minute. But
do you have to have a Japanese account?
I can buy it on Steam.
You can get it on Steam. You can get it on Amazon just in English. I think the way they get around is they release it for the Southeast Asian region. But it's in English, which would work in like the Philippine market, so all of the U.S. buyers can just buy that version, and it works.
Maybe wing on the cover.
But so the thing about these games, and you can really see it now that you know this, is each individual mech will have their own unique attacks based on kind of how they play in their series, and they'll have extremely like detailed animations where like that's honestly a big part of the appeal, is just like watching these zany animations that they come up with for like Gurren Lagann doing the Giga Drill Break on a ball from Gundam or something like that. And in that we came to our technique system, where we decided we want something where each character will have their own unique attacks and abilities, which in turn made us create a system. And in this case, it's not even a remix. We created a system where you could have a balanced tactical combat while developing your own attacks. The Valor's core system, or the Valor stat, where you slowly accrue valor over time, and then if you like scream attack names, or you yell about love and honor and friendship, you get more valor from your GM. That also came from Super Robot Wars, because in Super Robot Wars there's a morale or a will system where, depending on the actions you take in game, your character gains morale, and like certain moves and abilities they can't even use until they're past a certain point, because they're not fired up enough to use these techniques. And you can see this direct translation in how we developed both the technique system and the limitation system, where you can make the techniques cost less of your stamina, your mana, basically, by imposing harder limits on it. So we took a lot, I think, from kind of the more video game and JRPG engine, because we were trying to emulate Japanese media. So what are the games in Japan that are most likely to do this kind of a feel? And that would be the JRPGs, the strategy RPGs and stuff like that. And then we ripped off 4E for the action economy, and I don't regret it at all, and I do it again. And,
I think like
that action economy is fantastic. I cannot.
I love how people say nice things about 4E after the fact, because every time I talk about anyone about 4E when 4E was a thing, no one would play 4E with me. Like, everyone's like, 4E is terrible. I hate it. Blah, 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 negative, negative, negative. Go play Pathfinder. And now it's like, 4E had this great thing. 4E had that great thing. Why would you play 4E with me 10 years ago when I wanted to play 4E? Where were you?
I was playing 4E actually, and then developing Valor, but I wouldn't say it publicly because I got tired of the response. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think another thing that like stuck out to me about the way Valor works, it's like unique for tabletop RPGs, but like kind of fits from what I know about JRPGs, which isn't very much, is that by the time you get to high level play, all the numbers just get blown out.
Yes. Yeah,
and
the
like
numbers mean nothing.
And like that like stuck out to me. It's like, oh, that explains like the whole like blown out power curve of actual JRPGs from what I can understand. Like that was adapted as well, which really stuck out to me.
It really is, and a big part of that is the feel, right? If you're coming over from, say, Final Fantasy, you're used to at end game, depending on how much you've decided to optimize your party and do all the extra side quests, you might be dropping 9,999 damage.
Yes.
In later games, you might be dropping 99,999 damage. Big numbers are exciting. We said this a lot in our early development. One of the reasons Valor rounds up is because bigger numbers are exciting, and that feels
I think that's good. Yeah.
better. It's a talking point too. Every time I'm teaching someone the game, it'll come up and it'll be like, always round up in Valor. Bigger numbers are exciting.
Bigger numbers.
It's absolutely capturing that specific feel and putting every aspect of the design that you possibly can into delivering on that specific fantasy. That's how we did it, and that's why we did it the way we did it. Like, everything about Valor is designed to make you feel like you're playing a JRPG or you're playing an anime.
That's fucking amazing.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love everything about it. Everything about it's amazing.
You told me shouting is a mechanic, and I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
Good. Bring it to me.
It's like I think like that's a very important concept for when you're making a tabletop game, is like, what themes are you taking from your inspirations? And then also, I mean, you were talking about this whole thing, but it's like on a broader spectrum, like understanding your medium versus the medium that you're taking from is something that I think, like, I see a lot of games where like you just find a PDF online or something, or somebody's like making their first kind of game where it's like, I'm going to use Bionicle as an example, because the one Bionicle tabletop RPG is awful. And it's because
Bionicle,
it's so good. It's like Bionicle's great, but yeah. This is a universal hobby everyone in chat has, right? Everyone understands what I'm talking about.
Of course.
I should have used Avatar. Actually, I should use Avatar Last Airbender. But like, I'm gonna use Bionicle. So like, it's the idea of like, okay, well, what are you like? What's your inspiration? And like, people will be like, okay, well, it needs to have like, okay, tabletop games have combat in it. Tabletop games have like these narrative like skills in it or whatever. But also it's like, oh, I love like this aspect of my of like Bionicle. I love like, oh, the lore of Bionicle, the world building of it, or I love like the cool weapons and like the elements that and the masks and whatever. And sometimes like you try and capture everything, or like you try and fit like an inspiration into a shell that it doesn't belong in, or like I don't know, like I guess I'm kind of throwing this out to everybody as well, but like this idea of like understanding your inspirations and then also understanding the medium you're translating them to, right? Like, so how are you translating Bionicle? Like, are you like what aspect of it are you taking from it? Like, are you trying to do everything? Maybe you should focus on one. How do you like you know, tabletop games are storytelling games, right? To a majority of it. Or are you making like a tabletop combat game, and like is that what you're focusing on? And like I think like some of my favorite explorations of medium from like taking inspiration from other medium into the tabletop scene is like kind of changing your expectation of it, right? Where it's like, okay, well, I think like Lancer and Beam Saber are really good examples of this. Lancer and Beam Saber are two really good mech games. They focus on very different parts of the mech genre. Lancer is about the mech combat, and it's great because it's got that nice mech building and that crunch, and like combat feels interesting and dynamic.
And CompCon
Saber,
too, like,
huh?
And like CompCon on top of that,
Oh,
like
yes.
you see the character sheet and it looks like a mech HUD.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's great. And then like Beam Saber is about the pilots. Like you're talking about like the gun, like you're talking about like Gundam's pilots and like the character dramas and the political stories of it. And the mechs are there, but the mechs are there. Yeah, I mean, like Imani, you could probably talk about that, surely. And it's like both are really great, but it's like they're not trying to butt heads because they know what inspiration they're trying to map to tabletop. It's like tabletop games are, as a medium, is such a vast storytelling medium. Like what are you trying to do? How are you trying to adapt it? Like what shells are you trying to put into things? What can you break? All that stuff I think is like Austin was talking all about that with like JRPGs, and it's like Valor touches JRPGs in such a very like interesting way on the tabletop.
I think this is a very important conversation too, because this what we're talking about, I think, kind of also is about some of the pitfalls that a lot of newer or inexperienced developers might fall into. I know just from what I've seen out there that, for example, a lot of folks who try to bring Pokemon onto the tabletop RPG space have this expectation that it's like, all right, well, I got to be true to the stats. I got to be able to include all of these monsters that, like, not even the devs are trying to do that anymore because there's so much.
They should try harder. They have no excuse.
They have families.
They have families, right? Yeah. No crunch. Crunch is bad in terms of the abusing your workers to put out a product. Crunchy rules, however, are good. But the idea that if you're trying to adapt a medium, there are sacred cows, I think, will slow you down. Yes. If you are trying to bring something into the tabletop RPG space. Being extremely attached to sacred cows, either in the tabletop RPG space or in the medium that you are attached to. I unfortunately I don't know Bionicle very well, but going back to
no, it's fine.
That wasn't my thing. But like going back to the Pokemon, like if you as a Pokemon player are 100% all in on like I need to have unique stats for all like 10,000 of these creatures. I don't know how many Pokemon there are. I'm sorry.
10,000.
But
1,042.
Okay.
But 807. I don't know what you're talking about.
But doing that is not like can you visualize just how much work that's going to take?
They did it themselves.
Well, and there's like that's an inherent scope creep, and that's an inherent potential problem with the premise. So if you are doing a tabletop RPG adaptation, you need to be able to thread that needle. You need to be able to say, okay, what's reasonable for me, a probably indie developer who probably also doesn't actually own the license for this project and cannot make money off of it? What is reasonable for me to do? What feel can I capture? How can I be true to this series, but also make it work in a tabletop game? And these are questions you really need to be asking yourself, and you really need to have good answers for. Like, I could probably run Pokemon in Valor, but the way I would do it would not necessarily feel like the Pokemon video games, where you are one super 10-year-old walking around with 6 of the great gods of the universe and stomping all over the comical team of the week. I would instead likely look to the manga, for example, where you have the kids who have kind of more specialized, where they might have like 3 or 4, and I would cut that down even more. I would say you have a partner. You have one Pokemon to whom you are incredibly bonded, and that is your build. You are building
now we're
that
talking-
one Pokemon.
Or go Mystery Dungeon and say you are the Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
I will
something
say-
like Mystery Dungeon.
Mystery
we're not
Dungeon would be
talking
great.
Digimon.
Okay,
We're not
okay,
talking
okay.
Digimon.
All right. Wait. Y'all are gonna get so off topic.
I mean,
because
let's go
Pokemon
back
Digimon.
to
Like, go back
Yeah.
to the heart of
Okay.
narrative and bringing in mechanics that apply to that narrative.
Sure.
Raising my hand. Raising my
Imani.
hand.
Yes, go, Imani.
So talking about bringing in mechanics from other things. So like I said, I'm making a series of games called Neo City Chronicles. It is a series of games about magical girls and giant robots in various ways. There are 3 core games to this. The first game that I put out was Magic Girls and NECA, because I am amazing at naming shit. Like, I'm amazing at naming shit.
It's a great name though.
It's a digital lore. It's a play-by-post game which is meant to live and die on Discord. Because the idea is, and so I did for that particular game was I stole from LiveJournal. I went back to the dark days of LiveJournal RP chat. I dug up so many different forum posts about how a LiveJournal RP worked, and I made a game. And I was like, okay, how can I implement this on Discord? I'm in the process. I am in the actual process of learning how to make a Discord bot, so I can properly implement like scheduling and events and like random events that would happen in this game. Like, it's gonna be great, but like what I stole from that game, I'm stealing something basically in terms of for that game. What I'm stealing from are Discord bots, like different things that Discord bots do, LiveJournal role-playing forums from like a decade ago, because god damn it, I won't let it die. And then like I stole like a lot of like, because there are no dice in this game. I was just like, fuck dice. I don't want to deal with a dice bot and building a dice bot in that.
Imani, how are your dice? Fuck your dice.
But that's another
my
thing,
God.
right? TTRPGs aren't all dice revolved. We still haven't even touched narrative mechanics from like For the Queen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Someone
For
mentioned
the Queen.
poker or blackjack.
Yeah. But then the other thing I did when I was making Magic Girls and NECA, the other thing is like I stole the way the not organization of play, but I guess organization of play is how I'm gonna phrase it, of the way Blades in the Dark works, where you do a thing, you plan a thing, you do a thing, and then you do downtime. Those are the 3 phases of play of this game. And sorry, I'm looking at chat. Someone's like, "Live play by post." Yes, that is my life. I have a Dreamwidth account. Yes, I know
dear.
that. Huh? But so in terms of like, you can like the thing about game making, the thing about I do for game making is anything is up for grabs when it comes to making games.
Literally.
That makes
anything.
sense.
Like it doesn't like you can literally like you can like if I could figure out I in terms of like I'm using Notion to build a wiki for Neo City Chronicles. I'm using every available tool to I'm like it's like oh someone's like I would make a life wiki about my life. I'm like oh I can use it to make a game wiki for my game, and people can like collect their information about their game in this Notion doc, in these Notion docs on this Notion table. Like it's not stealing, it's repurposing things for other ideas, like and putting them to better use.
Rare to steal.
Cool. Did you all feel comfortable? Do you want to pivot towards what modes of how do you make the system? What tools are you using to make your systems?
Yeah,
let's
Imani
do that.
brought up the
Let's do it.
Notion.
Oh yes, let's talk about tools, because were any of you on my devlog panel this morning?
I
can't
was
remember.
there.
It's been so long. It's been so long.
I was on
Been
that
a long
devlog
day.
panel.
Yeah. So you all right? So if you were awake at 6 o'clock in the morning when I was awake before the sun came up, you would know that I use Notion, Google Docs, and Google and screenshots and like PDF exports as JPEGs to do my work. And I print things. I print things and I put them in binders and pretty binders. And I do things by hand. That's how I make games. And I have a tablet somewhere in the world where I wrote 11 by 18 pages of notes for a board game. Like I make games with whatever's handy. I have here. These are cards that I printed for a game that I'm working on. I print and hand cut these.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple hundred of them.
Imani is just the
multi-tool.
tool. You are a Swiss Army knife.
So if you want a quick crash course in what I spent a lot of money and a lot of time at college learning, I'm going to give you this information for free. Prototype your games. I think like this is like probably the best advice I can give, especially for this panel of like stealing ideas, hacking stuff. I have like a background in board game design and stuff like that. And
my God,
a lot
Viditya, please help me. I'm building a board game. I'm not even kidding.
Fucking hit me up. I'll help you. I love board games. I haven't made a board game in a while. But so the idea is like, you first of all play games, right? But I think that's something that we could talk about for a while. So I'm not going to get us tangented yet again. Play games, see what you like, and then quickly, messily throw things together. This might sound really scary, but play test a prototype of just a few mechanics. I know like role-playing games take hours, but you could do like a vertical slice. You can say like, hey, do y'all have like 45 minutes to try a combat? I just want to try to see how dice roll. I want to see how like these moves feel. Like can we do character creation? Can we just like jump into a thing? I think I came up with a few social moves, or I want to know how my basic moves feel. Let's do like a scene, right? And I think like that in terms of like the tools that I use is like fucking prototype. Just like type up the simplest thing in Google Docs. Like if you need a character sheet, write up a character sheet. If not, just ask everybody to grab like a pad and say you need a name, you need pronouns, you need like these 3 stats. Like just and I think like that's pretty important. Like quick and dirty is honestly your best friend. And again, like the free advice about like the college thing is that like that's literally what all of my assignments were like. It was like, hey, you have a week to make a game, or you have 2 weeks for a final. And it's like that taught me to be a better designer and led me to the products that I'm proud of, because I made a bunch of like proof of concepts, right? And this is also maybe a little bit of a different thing, but like make bad games, or like make small bad games that will like, and then like finish things to be like, all right, that was a prototype. Maybe this didn't work. I need to scrap it. But then like 2 projects down the line, you'll be like, oh, I had a note, and like write down, like document. So be like, oh, I had a note from like this other game that might actually work. Like it didn't work there, but it might work here and stuff like that.
Like literally, like if your imposter syndrome is going like, oh, what if this sucks?
So what?
Literally go like K.
Yeah.
And just post that shit. Post that shit.
Post that shit and charge $3 for it. That's what you do.
Charge $5 for it. Like.
Depends on the medium that you're in, so that you get a better dividend. But I want to riff on some of the things that Viditya was saying too. Is like play testing, I think, is the most important thing you can do constantly at every possible stage, even if the game doesn't exist yet. I'd love to share an idea that I'm part of a local collective up in Boston called the Boston Area Game Designers Meetup, or Borgade. Shout outs to Borgade. But one of the members talks a little bit about play storming, which is just a fascinating idea to me, where you take a game idea and you begin to develop it as you are playing it in real time. So you will communicate about mechanics as you're making things, as you're talking. Like, okay, what is this game about? It's a game where we are, I'm going to use stuff that's on my desk. We're making craft sodas. That's our thing. It's like it's a craft soda set collection game, and someone else can be like, okay, great. So obviously we have to have different kinds of like sodas that we're making, and we have to source ingredients. So there should be a mechanic for that. Okay, sit down. Let's write that out, and then we do the thing. Right.
What if you stack dice and like that's making little soda cans and
or like filling the kegs or something that you're putting at your little shop. And the higher the stacks you have, the more value they are, or whatever. You take them out. So you're building it as you go. I think that is such a beautiful idea to just do it. Right. If you just sort of sit on the idea forever, it's just sort of like it's kicking around in your head. But until you put it to paper, you're not going to be able to see it and interact with it. For LARP design, we do before we launched our game, for each of the games that I've run, we do what's called a war day, where we set aside like 6 hours at a campsite or a public park or whatever. We take a playtest build of the rules, a number of the staff for the game, and a number of players that have access to those alpha rules. We'll just build up a couple of characters, maybe a couple of monsters or antagonists or something, whatever the game is about, sample builds. And we go through a series of scenarios and stress test those rules and say, if this is a game where combat is important, here's a scenario where one person finds out exactly how many enemies they can take on at once before it feels not fun, or before they die. Or here's a scenario where a group of criminals has to get past a guard and get into a vault and get back out. Here's like 10 different collections of character types. See which ones deliver the most satisfying game experiences, which ones feel broken, which ones feel like they don't have enough oomph. But you put people in these situations and you let the people that are actually going to play your game do it, because you're writing a game for the player. Right. I think it's fine that we write games for ourselves. In a way, maybe most lyric games can be said to be like, this is a poem that like I made for myself and I'm putting it into the universe and you can experience it if you want. But I think ultimately, like, games are sort of a service. As dirty as that might sound, like, you are making something for other people to partake of. They're going to give you money and then they're going to get a play experience and they can make it their own, but you're still putting some intentionality, ideally, into that design. So as to like how I personally do that, I like Scrivener. I like Google Docs. Honestly, I have a lot of Google Doc tabs. For Scrivener is great because you can have like little note cards floating around on one side of your screen, and then on another side you can have like a PDF. So if I'm reading, I'm really into Legacy, Life Among the Ruins right now. So let me have that PDF over here, and if I scroll down and I see, wow, this is a PBTA game that puts advantage in there. There are things where you can just roll 3d6 instead of 2d6. Whoa, what a cool idea. Let me clip that and drag it over into my ideas board and do that. You know, there's another Boardgade member who had a really awesome idea where they are working on a game. They don't know what it is. They're trying to figure it out. So they just went out and printed out like 50 different play sheets from PBTA games that they were interested in. And they made modular character sheets where they're like, let me just cut up the like the Fae from Urban Shadows. Like, let me cut up the Hardholder from Apocalypse World, and let me cut up what like the Slide looks like in Blades in the Dark. And we just put those moves on a sheet and start to build an assembly out of it. And this like Frankenstein sheet experience is like, there are verbs on this sheet. I'm starting to see a picture of what this looks like, because for some people, you just can't visualize it unless it's physically in front of you. Like, even just having rules in front of you doesn't make any sense. So I think there's a lot of power in like doing that, things like that.
So in terms of tools for doing that, if you want a little more structure to like that, like prototyping process, look at games like Bashir Gauss's My Players Have Unionized, or look at Omi-chan's anti-rule toolkit. Those are both the ways of like taking the original game and basically ripping out the rules and replacing them on the fly in a structured, intentional way. That's a good way to like start like brainstorming ideas like while playing a game. Also, in terms of if you're writing your own system, well, one, I'm a proponent of if you're modeling out your dice math in Excel or NumPy or MATLAB or some other like math tool, unless you let you can like rip other people's dice math, and that's often a very good path because often that dice math is very well laid out. But if you want fuckery, I'd recommend you model it out.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. You're gonna bring it back. So one, I think it would be helpful for the audience to kind of give a good 101 on dice math and what that means to break down as a game designer.
Sure. So dice math. Amr's not here to help me explain this.
Yeah.
So
I can take this one if
dice.
you want.
You can tag team on this.
Okay. Well,
Please.
go ahead, go, Ajay, and then I'll pop in.
So the first step of dice math is like you have to ask yourself what needs randomization. What does randomization mean for your game? Because you can make an RPG with 0 randomization. Belonging As I Have Lying, Wander Home, 0 randomization. So it's really a matter of what things just happen when you say they happen, and in what terms, and what requires a bit of chance. So you have to think about it first that way, and then you have to think about, like how predictable do you want the results to be? How much do you want players to be able to see, like what their choices are in terms of probabilities? How competent do you want characters to feel? So you play a game like Blades in the Dark, and it's got this like nice, satisfying, like you roll a bunch of d6s and you roll it out, and it's like really satisfying in that way. But the dice math that are built out so that like if you have like I think 3 dice, it's like a 1 in 3 chance of a total success or something like that. If you roll 2 dice, it's like a 1 in 4 chance. Like that's thought out dice math of like someone thought of like how often do I want characters to just blow out this task? How competent do I want them to feel? Whereas if I wanted to play, for example, for Bolt, I went with I want the default task to have like a 50-50 shot of winning. And then you can like boost it through other mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally modeled it out in Microsoft Excel, just like do a bunch of random number generator stuff, tally out how often, given a certain threshold and a certain like dice bonus, how often is a success happening. If we wanted a horror game, I would probably knock down the chance of doing something properly to like 30%.
Mm-hmm.
So like think about it in that way, and then think, okay, do I want to do the math and modeling myself? In which case you should get a computer to do it for you, or crack out a probability textbook if you're an absolute baller, which I'm not. Or you can rip someone else's dice math. Like Bolt is the dice math is done. Valor, I assume the dice math is done.
We did
Genesis
ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like Forge in the Dark, the dice math is done. Genesis, same deal. And that's the way to go about it. Is like you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you don't want to redo the math.
So part of game design is what I'm hearing as a non-game designer myself is that dice math is a lot of prob and stats, in case you didn't take that class in school or fell asleep like I did. And you're telling me the prob and stats of these crunchy, beautiful pieces of plastic, wood, or whatever material you buy, you as a game designer are putting real narrative impact to the actual math.
You are.
I think in an ideal situation,
Okay.
that's what's happening. Because I do think
Yeah.
that there are a lot of people that will take a mechanic that they think is interesting or they're familiar with, rather than something that they have very intentionally selected. We saw this a lot in the early 2000s with the open gaming license, when third edition 3.5 D&D was just sort of like, take the structure and do whatever you want with it. And so there were tons of these OGL games that were just being shelled out and saying, well, this is a system you're already familiar with. You roll a d20, you add your modifier, and you try and beat a target number. That's fairly intuitive for most people, but the mechanic of doing that doesn't always fit every single narrative that you're trying to push. And especially if the modifiers that you're applying in your game with your various abilities, with your feats, with your character types, that can sometimes cause problems or just not make the game sing. In a perfect world, I think in a perfect world, we would make games where the difference between thinking about the game and playing the game is seamless, where everything about it feels like it's just part of the same mechanic. You're immersed in the gameplay itself, the narrative. And sometimes that means that like the gameplay is reading the dice the way that it is with Genesis. Like it's very exciting to look at a pool of dice and say, right, it's a ritual. Like how many successes did I get? How do I cancel them out? as opposed to a game where you're rolling like a literal fistful of D6s or D10s
Shotgun
or something like that.
combat.
And you're like, right, you're like, oh, D8. So there's 8s, and this 10 explodes, which means I re-roll it. Okay, now I need more dice, and that kind of breaks the flow of the game. If that is the point of your game, like if it's something like Valor, you want people to feel excited by having big numbers and big like bursts, those highs. Perfect. But that in the case of Valor, right? I'm assuming that was, as you've said, it's 100% intentional to make people feel that way, rather than like, this is a pool we want.
We're a single die system too, which is even funnier since we are opposed D10 rolls, but that's part of the feel too. And that's also a trick that you can use if it works for your game. There are a number of ways you can blunt the probability. We chose opposed D10s for our core mechanic because, one, it feels appropriate in anime, in a typical like shonen action anime, where if Byakuya, this super fast, extremely arrogant captain is gonna shank Ichigo in the back, the first time he just does it because he's way over leveled Ichigo. Ichigo can't fight back. But the next time you see it, Ichigo turns around and blocks it with his sword, and that is an active response. In D&D, your AC is very passive. It's I, the aggressor, roll against it, and if I beat it, then what I do wins. And we didn't feel that was appropriate, so that's why we did the opposed D10 rolls. We also did that because it gives more narrative consistency. 2d10s are going to give you a reasonably balanced result based on kind of a general 50-50 spread where we slightly favor the aggressor, both in terms of more abilities that can give you accuracy than can give you evasion, and the general tie is always going to the aggressor. Our general attempt was to make it so that 60, maybe 70% of attacks will go off the way they're supposed to. But when you are moving to defend yourself, you have that tactile response where I'm making a decision. I am rolling to defend myself, and also I am deciding on which attribute I will muster to defend myself, which will have its own different effects. And we like I mentioned with Ajey, we did the dice probability ourselves. My co-creator Quinn Gordon is brilliant, like extremely proficient with math, computer programmer. Like got hired by Amazon directly out of college by solving a problem that he wasn't supposed to be able to solve in the interview.
Oh, big brain!
Good little hunting shit.
So yeah, like they're extraordinarily talented. And I was very fortunate working with them because they gave me that dice probability, and we talked through it. Where I always am coming in kind of from that feel perspective, right? Where it's like, all right, these are how these numbers work, and fortunately today you have online dice probability factors, and like that math is out there. So really, the thing I would say you really want to focus on is that feel. Picking the dice that suits what you're trying to do. I mentioned this in a prior panel, but for example, if you're picking a D20, which I think was Simon, you mentioned that that's not always right for what you want. And I agree, because the D20 is such a huge variance, 1 through 20. The bigger the variance from the dice, the harder it is going to be to balance your abilities to give you meaningful impact on that. That's why I say, a Dungeons and Dragons game might start out with pretenses towards Lord of the Rings, but it will often end up Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The randomness of the D20 and that huge variation means that wacky things are gonna happen because the dice either like you or they hate you. And
this is why a lot of OSR games like work well with D20s, is because they rely on that swingy result. That's why it's swinging. It goes up and down quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Because in an OSR game, if you roll, you've already lost, and you're just seeing how bad things go.
There's a great example, even Nanosar. There's an old game, and if anyone, shout out to anyone who actually knows what I'm talking about. It's called Paranoia. And this
Is that
game
the one with like respawns where everything kills you?
Yeah, this game
You have a limited number of clones and
it's a game where you
everything.
start
It's
with
a very
six
like
six
GM
emergency,
gotcha.
emergency backup clones, because things can and will kill you, and the typical fatality rate of a Paranoia game is 1 to 600%, and it uses a single D20 system, and it really works because it's supposed to be enormously swingy, like this dark comedy. I am troubleshooters. I find trouble and I shoot it. And if I commit treason, the computer will liquefy my organs.
With a Philly accent.
Right, yeah, exactly. It works for that. And that goes back to that intentionality that Simon was talking about. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer as to which dice or dice sets are going to be right for a game. But that decision needs to be made with purpose.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
if I can talk about like in this like same vein, but to bring up like a very popular system, PBTA, like its probability is baked into its narrative consequences. Like and I think like some people like maybe don't notice this, but it's very much like PBTA's gradual success. It's 10 plus, 7 to 9, and 6 minus is really smart. And why like a majority of those of the PBTA games that I think like get it are like, oh well, you know, you're telling stories about like the like success at a cost is going to show up often, and like there are like I'll like read moves and kind of be like, oh okay, so like am I a competent person, am I not a competent person, like what is the level of the narrative you want to tell, because it's like 7 to 9 is going to show up a bunch on a 2d6 like because 7 is the average number on that curve, and so like you know what are the like if you have a game that has heavy consequences on a 7 and 9, then that means that you're going to be like that's the tone of the game you're playing. But if like your consequences are less on a 7 and 9, then it's like okay cool, like you know maybe you're like it's the same idea of like do you want to be do you want to be like high adventurers who are like super competent and like can go through and like mow down a bunch of people as they wreck a dungeon or whatever y'all want to do, it like or do you want to like be I guess like is delving dangerous and tough and like like most of the time you're gonna swing and they're gonna swing back, like that's like and like that's an
Dark
important
Souls
thing.
versus Munchkins.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like, or do you want to be like you have to think about that with your dice math and like what you're thinking about when you are like coming up with it, right?
And not just like what you roll, but also what you add to the roll, because like because of the like the triangular distribution of a PBTA, like you're not only is your average 7 to 9, you're really biased towards like 7 to 9.
7 to 9, yeah.
So those
And
results
like
had better be interesting because you're going to roll it constantly.
But also by that logic, like adding a +1 isn't going to shift things a whole lot.
No.
Similarly in D&D, where the dice math is uniform, like it's always a flat
5%.
probability. Like each number is equally likely. Adding a +1 pretty transparently adds 5% chances to your shot. Which isn't much. It doesn't feel like a whole lot. So +1 in D&D, it comes out in the wash.
Yeah.
And for example, with Bolt, I wanted to shrink that down. So like I went with the D10, which is there's a smaller band of possibilities. And then compared to a game like Cyberpunk 2020, where your bonuses are often like between like +5 and like +20. I shrunk that down too. So now it's like if you're rolling a +5, you're a high roller. And what both of those do,
D12s.
12s are cool.
Yeah.
D12s.
But what that does is that all of a sudden a +1 means a lot in Bolt.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like a +1 is plus 10% chance. A +2 means you increase your chance of success by like 1 in 5. Like all of a sudden, those +1, +2s that kind of come out of the wash in a game like Pathfinder mean a whole lot. and also any mechanic that lets you increase your result by 1 becomes super powerful.
All right. I love it. I'm going to jump in. Thank you
Uh-huh.
so much for explaining dice math. So, what
Thank
I'm
you.
hearing is taking what you like from systems mechanically with intention, choosing your dice math with intention, choosing your modifiers with intention.
With intention.
So, now that you've essentially walked us through creating your system with intention,
Mm.
play testing.
Play
Oh,
testing.
this is a good
Play
one.
Play
testing.
testing.
I want to hear from Imani, Viditya.
Yeah.
Give it to me.
Okay, but you want to
Money
go
you
first? Okay.
I talked last time. Yeah, you go.
Okay, hold on. I'm eating beef jerky in the background.
Oh.
Jen, if you've been participating in Gen Con, just here is uncle, whatever you want to call me. Go hydrate. Make sure you're eating
Yeah.
at regular intervals.
Yes. Eat. Oh my god.
Everyone's just like.
Wait, do you want me to go? Do you want to?
No, we're having a time in chat because we've been sitting at 69
Oh,
viewers
69
for a while.
viewers.
Okay, so here's my deal with playtesting.
Yep.
I've only technically playtested like 5 games that I've made.
Counting.
29.
So you're cranking out all sorts of games,
Right.
but
So here's the deal. So for 2020, I failed at the task, kind of, sort of. My goal was to put out 26 games in 52 weeks. They were all one-page B5 size games. A lot of them I just stole Powered by the Apocalypse, Forged in a Dark Math. Like I just stole the dice math and put it where I needed to be. So they were easy narrative games. I had to figure out weird niche stories. But I only playtested some of them because they got to a point where I was like, are these separate games? Do these need to be different games? Or are these the same game, just reskinned? And it's like, do I care? No, I don't care. But let me just double check and make sure. Let me confirm what I already know. So with those, I playtested those. I spent like 6 hours playtesting a bunch of games. It was exhausting. I'm never doing that again. But for another game that I made, which is Check Yes Romeo, which I had I printed a copy of the book, which has cards somewhere in the world. I'm gonna playtest that because I want to do a Kickstarter for that game, and I don't want to Kickstarter a game that I haven't playtested, even though I know functionally the game works. Because the game is literally Guess Who meets the dating game. Like you can't. There's no way to break this game. It's just either you like people you're playing with, or you don't like people you're playing with. There's nothing in between. And so for that, I'm going to playtest to just see if people enjoy the game. But realistically, I know the mechanics work. Like I know for a fact it is a functioning game. And then for board games, I playtested my game. I playtested the solo mode of my game because if it works in solo mode, it'll work with multiple people. And also, I live by myself, so I can only playtest solo games. But in terms of playtesting, two suggestions. One, like Viditya said, prototype things. Prototype things in tabletop simulator if you're making board games. Print things out if you're making like TTRPGs, and write on them. Like mark up your copies of your game. Yes, kill trees.
Murder those trees.
Someone said anything about a cat?
yeah, we saw your cat back
The
there.
cat's behind
It
you.
was contemplating something at the wall.
Scheming.
Oh, my mic was off.
Yes, I was gonna say, Viditya, you're muted, my love.
Whoops. Imani, if I could jump in.
Yes, go for it.
So
I'm done.
playtesting. Playtesting. I'm gonna sound very hypocritical because I say playtest as much as you can, as much as you want. Every time you play a game, I do genuinely believe every time you play a game, it will get better the second time, like the next time. I also, just as an artist, know that you will never see your game to be done. It is very rare for somebody to go, my art is done. So playtesting kind of helps you go like, okay, well, what can be changed? What's maybe not right about it? Maybe it's just editing stuff. Like, oh, I played it and like somebody, like the mechanics are tight, but how I worded it was bad. Like there's a bunch of great stuff about playtesting. However, the cool thing about like remixing and hacking and like kit bashing and stuff like that is like sometimes it works. And that's the beauty of hacking, is you could be like, you know what? I changed the content of a game. Like I changed the skin of it. I added my little like interesting thing, or like maybe you're adding a mechanic to an existing system. And like, that's what you want to kind of play to say like, oh, maybe like this thing can throw it in a weird direction. But like on it, like you could just say like, it works. I know it works because like, I'm not radically shifting content, right? Like you're making a D20 game, you just change out your skills, you change out your stats, you change out your like character creation, and there's a good chance that it's fine. You know what I mean? Or like a PBTA game, like you just change out your playbooks. I think like there's this awful balance of I want to play games, I want to make games, and I have to play test my games, and it's like this time sink. And it goes back to my idea of like, or my advice of like, do vertical slices. Like it is so much easier to just be like, hey, before we start our regularly sessioned weekly game, would y'all be down to do like a 45 minutes to an extra hour of just a play test or something like that? Either or, like, but it's like playtesting, good. Playtest if you can. You maybe don't need to. God knows I have it, and I've made money off of my games. It's a big sham, and but before I like push off, Imani did make a good point though, that like I play tested the game that I kickstarted, Space Goblins, mostly because there's just like an extra level of like legitimacy to it, where it's like, okay, well, like I'm like putting it out there for like a lot of money. I'm like, hopefully people are gonna, people want to assume that this is now like a much more professional product. If it's something that I'm making for fun, like it's just me and I'm making it for fun, but I put the time in. Always get paid for your time. You don't need a playtest, but if it's like, I think there is something where if somebody could say like, I paid like, I kickstarted it and I paid for it and I waited for shipping and it's fucking trash, like this isn't playtested well, maybe you should playtest those games. Like maybe you should see that those are kind of tight and well done. So yeah.
And also think about how much your game has like give in it. Like the way Bolt, for example, set up, I keep talking about Bolt, is that
shocking
is that the game is very much, it depends on the GM to balance encounters a little bit in terms of how many goons you send into a group and how much you add to their dice rolls when the goons do things affects the difficulty of the game.
Mhm.
But I also added like guardrails, like a code test would, of like, if this, like, don't throw out an error, throw out this number instead. Like if the combat encounter is too hard, don't let the player characters die without the players letting them die. And like that's a guardrail against the game being too punishing.
Okay. So as game designers, what makes playtesting rather than people are playing your game?
I think I have a slice on it, unless I don't want to cut anyone else off. But
I have a pithy line, but that's about it.
Well, on playtesting and playtesting in general, I think running a LARP has been a really interesting example of playtesting in the long run, because the games that I run, like I've came off of running a 6-year campaign. I'm in year 2 of another 6-year campaign. I ran another game for 2 years. That's just like a one shot. Like this is what you get, X limited number of games. Those whole periods are effectively one long playtest period. We often joke, the rest of my directors and I will joke, that we'll know how to run this game by the time we finish it. And that's absolutely true. Like we will have refined our rules and our play experience and the way that we tell stories to such a razor's edge that we will be able to deliver a incredibly satisfying product when we're all completely burnt out of the project and the story has already been concluded. And I think that's fine. It's okay to have a finite point on your games in general. But I think of what we do as sort of like being MMO devs, where we wrote the game, we put it in front of players, and we're doing what we call seasons now, where we do 2 years of one story arc within the world. So like the whole first 2 years is, you find out there's a rival gang that is interested in your territory. They set you up, they try and frame you, they come after your assets, you get in a gang war with them, and by the end of it, the police step in and issue martial law to say, okay, gangland violence is too strong, now we do this. We left it at a bad place for contemporary events, which we couldn't have predicted, but like the point of being that those 2 years in the time, the months leading up to the end of that first arc, I was smashing my head into a computer, taking everything that I'd learned from running the game for 2 years and saying, okay, we wanted this character type to be sort of a melee brawler, and nobody who picks that character type is doing that. Why is that? Okay, if the character type is you're a mad scientist, which is sort of I guess an ableist term. You're a scientist who is working with experimental chemicals, and you want to make these mutagens that give people superpowers. If one of those intended play experiences is I punch and while on magic drugs, and the other one is I do super science, and everyone is doing super science, then I, as a developer, have a choice. I can choose to say, well, everyone should be playing the punch scientists. And instead, I listened to the players and said, well, if everyone is doing action scientist, how do we make that character class more exciting to do what the players want it to do? And ideally, I think that's what an addition update includes a little bit of, if you're iterating on your game. So I think of those last 2 years as like both a campaign and a long playtest, because now we can say, well, these abilities are too complicated, cut them. These abilities are not powerful enough, punch them up. What are we missing in the game? What are people saying, like, God, I wish I could be someone who goes up to people and just gives them presents. Okay, let's write an item into the game that has no value. It just makes someone feel good when they receive it from you. Like we're spot treating these things. And so that I think is the benefit of these longer term playtests, if you think about running your game like that. But overall, like, yeah, like the point of these long-term playtests, I think, is just to get a sense of like, this is the way the game works, this is how it was intended, here's how it's received, and here's how it's being played, and then deciding to go back to the original thing intentionally, why you're doing that, like telling people, I think, why you made a rule the way it is. And if you're coming down with a patch and saying, well, here's the new iteration, being very clear of like, this rule was taken out because it's not fun. This rule was taken out because it didn't add anything to the game. This rule was added in because everyone said, well, why isn't this in here? And we realized, you know what, there's no good reason to do that. You know?
Yeah. I have 2 things, and then I'm gonna let Austin, because I know Austin playtested Valor for like 15 years, so you have lots of long-term play.
10.
Okay, 10 years. 10 years. That's a long playtest. So here's my two playtest things. One is a playtest when I get feedback, useful, concrete feedback. If you're not giving me feedback, it's not a playtest. You're just playing a game. I don't like. I have a really fancy Google form that I make everyone fill out when they play my games. At the end of most games that I publish, it's like, fill this out and say you liked this game or you didn't like this game or whatever it was. The second thing is, I don't really playtest because I said I don't really playtest my games. All my games are in beta. Every game I'm making is technically in beta, and you're on version V1, and it will update. So when I get feedback, enough feedback to make a change, I'll make a change to the game. And then I'll just keep doing that until I have like a physical print copy of my game. And by then, if I do a physical print copy of my game, I would have run an actual real Kickstarter, not Kickstarter, a real playtest where I got like a bunch of feedback in a small amount of time. So I would have. Fuck.
For a second, I was like, did we lose Imani?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. I lost my. Basically, if I do a playtest, it's gonna be short. It's gonna be a short period of time. It's gonna be a lot of information, very, very fast. It's gonna be one day, 6 to 9 hours of just hardcore gaming. It's gonna be. I'm gonna run it through the gauntlet and then spit out the results and then just mass do changes. Yeah, that's my life.
Yeah.
So tell us about Valor and your 10-year playtest.
I acknowledge that I'm kind of an unusual case. We did about 10 years between initial iteration and release. And a lot of what Simon spoke of earlier really in my experiences is right. You'll spend a lot of time kind of, you want that rapid innovation cycle where in your initial development things may change very quickly. A lot of honestly past the first year of development was refinement and refinement in that time in which we were starting to tool up art. We resolved to do a professional small press appearing book, and that takes a lot of time and money, as it turns out. But I had some also just playtesting isn't just about like doing it, but it's also finding people to help you do that. And I have some thoughts on that too, which I think are also helpful. This is easier for people who live alone or live with roommates as opposed to like parents. But if you're able to kind of carve your own space where you can bring people into your home or into some kind of space and feed them, ideally home cooking, that goes over very well, and you will be astonished at the amount of your friends who will come over and play a game with you and tell you what they thought about it if you give them free food. So knowing how to cook or how to order really good pizza, big recommendations in the playtest process. But more to the point though, it's if you do intend to release a professional leaning product, and I'm very production oriented myself, I'm very much in that, like, I want to make money, I want to make my own business, I want to hire people, I want to do this full time. That's my dream. It behooves you to find people in your life who are really supportive of that and will help you out, and you don't want to like lean on them, just keep asking and asking. It's a two-way street. They are doing you an incredible service by sitting down and playing your game. So you need to express that gratitude, in words and deeds, and make sure that these people in your life who are helping you make the best games that you can, like, treasure these people, because they're so absolutely important, and you don't want to piss them off. You need them. You really need them.
As a playtester too, like there's kind of there's always a symbiosis between player and facilitator, game master, dungeon master, whatever term you want to use, if your game even has a GM in the first place, unless you're all just like telling a story together. But in also between the designer and the player, the designer, I think, when you're playtesting, has an obligation to be very clear about what they are playtesting for. If you're saying, hey, I took this mechanic from this game and I want to see if it works in the structure that I have, or like I've taken 3 separate ideas and I'm putting them together. Is this anything? Does this feel good to play? Does this feel like a game? Having that as opposed to, I wrote a game, let's play it for an hour. I think you're going to get very, very different information, and ultimately information that is sort of not helpful to you as a designer. You might feel good about it. Like if they come back and say, oh, this is great, I would buy this. Like, great. But what did you learn fundamentally about the design, about where to go with it, about how to modify your information? So when you give those clear objectives to players, participants that are helping you with this, they can start to give you more focused feedback. And then as a player, you can come in and ask the designer the exact same question, especially if they don't volunteer that for you, because they may not know or they may not feel comfortable asking you for that kind of thing. If you come in and if I go to like Metatopia and I sit down at a table and someone's like, hey, here's this game, it's a dungeon crawler, it's kind of like a roguelike, I can go, great. What are you asking for feedback on? Do you want to know how the game plays? Do you want to know what the dice feels like? Do you want to know like character concepts, combat dynamics? And then we can really zoom in on the meat and potatoes of those things, rather than getting this sort of shotgun blast of like very, very disparate ideas. It's going to be completely overwhelming to everybody. I come from the education world. So a lot of my background's in education, and a lot of the time when we talk about assessments, a playtest is an assessment, right? A playtest is like a pop quiz. It's like a test. It's like a term paper. You're finding out what your mastery of this thing is. Is it in enough of a position to share, right? And so we always say, in my neck of the woods, in my sort of constructivist pedagogy that I've picked up, a student can't hit a target that they can't see. So if you're not clear about what the objective is that you're testing for, there's no point in having the assessment in the first place. Like, you can give a student a test of a bunch of different questions. What will you learn about their mastery? That they memorize what's in the textbook, or that they can really synthesize that information and tell it to you back. The same thing for games. Like, we can play this game again for like half an hour, 4 hours, but without a goal, then why even do it? I think that having the goal is step number one, and then have fun with the playtest.
Dig it. All right, AJ, give me your pithy one line.
Regarding playtests, I want to quote the immortal Adam Savage. The only difference between screwing around and science is writing it down.
Yes.
So write down your notes. Take notes.
No. So my really quick comment before we go. We're gonna take a short break. Jess is gonna tell everyone about our break in a second. Is don't give people a middle option. That's one of the things I learned while playtesting. Don't go 1, 2, 3. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. Because if you give someone an option of going, it was average, they will muddle around and go, it was average. Just don't give them that choice. Just give them even numbers.
It's very true. Pick, otherwise you're left with I will default to the indecision. But with that being said, these game designers are in it for the long haul. We committed to a 3-hour panel, so we're going to take a brief bio break and let everyone stretch, refresh. We recommend doing that for the audience as well. Please hydrate, go get a snack, do what you will.
Water. Yeah.
Probably have another like 20 to 30 minutes on topics that these designers specifically want to talk about. And then we will open the floor to all the questions that you have in terms of game design. But we really appreciate you sticking around. We'll be right back in like 5 or 10 minutes. So go take care of yourselves. welcome back, y'all. Thank you for hanging tight. We feel recouped, refreshed, and ready to make an impact. Think we want to round out these brilliant game designers' thoughts in terms of intentionality in game design, how remixing and hacking things work in your intentionality, and what the end result is. Who wants to kick us off?
I can start.
Go for it.
I think a good place to start, and we were kind of talking about it before we went live, is see what exists that does what you want to do. So for me, I had two ideas in mind. I wanted a game that was unabashed about the fact that you're doing violence, and does that violence quickly. And two, I wanted a game that played quickly. So for the first one, I went with Cyberpunk 2020 because that's also a game about doing very dangerous violence. So I just stole a bunch of ideas for how Cyberpunk 2020 does stuff. And then in terms of going fast, I mean, I could have gone for Sonic, but there's not really a good.
Okay, I was muted, so I didn't hear my "gotta go fast" joke.
So instead, like, I ended up pulling a lot of influence from Fate. Or at least I read through Fate, and I was like, here's things I need to steal about, like, how do I talk about this game? So you don't have to just steal mechanics, you can steal ethoses. Like, how does Cyberpunk 2020 handle weird incidental skills? How do certain games handle movement? I stole that from, say, Genesis or Fate. Or, how do other games talk about their own rules? Like, how do they explain themselves? It's not just the dice math, it's not just the skill list, it's also like, how do they give you the language they give you to understand your game? How do they license stuff for other people to build on? Steal with intention. Because in coding, the biggest mistake you can make is to rip someone else's code without understanding why you're doing it.
Like that's the thing. So as a baby programmer, so like occasionally I make not VR games. I wish I made VR games. Soon, one day. But right now I'm making visual novels. But one of the things I learned very, very quickly is copying people's code from like cookbooks and Git pages doesn't help you learn anything. It literally, I don't know what I just did. I just knew it worked. And that's not a good way. Like, I can't make it better if I don't know how it works. And so I would say, don't look at what people did and do it yourself. Like it's the task of rewriting what you already know to be true. Like, it's gonna work, so rewrite and figure it out. Like, work with yourself visually and like on paper or on your computer, I guess, to make sure you understand what you're doing, and then explain it to someone else. If you can explain it to someone else, then you understand it.
Yeah, like so like a lot of my games, I actually like, I think I have like one or two hacks that I actually sell, but like true, like kind of true hacks. But most of like what I take from games is I read them and I go like, okay, well, like this is how it's presenting information to me. This is like what its mechanics are trying to tell me. It's like that constant loop of going, okay, what do I want in my game? This is probably something that I should have mentioned like very early on in this panel, but like I think the golden rule of game design, and I think we can all agree on this, is like, what are we trying to get our players to do? Like, what do you want your players to do? It's your
too.
Yeah, it's like feel. A feel is actually, I would even say like, what do you want your players to feel is 100% the golden question. I write that on top of like all of my docs. Like sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, but like it's always on my head, and I always go back to that question whenever I reference a rule, whenever I design in general, and that like is the core idea of like intentionality. So like it's trimming the fat, it's understanding what you want, right? So like when you take from another system, it's like, okay, I like PBTA math, I like moves, I like 6 to 7, I like bands of success. But do I want my players to like kind of have like, is this like a power fantasy game, right? And then so like suddenly you got to ask yourself, you got to like kind of do that deeper knowledge of like, okay, I understand what it's trying to do. How do I like take that? How do I spin it? Even if I'm not and why I mentioned like none of my games are like specifically hacks is because like a lot of it is like I like the concept of what this is doing. I understand how its math works. I like how these moves are written. I want to do something like that because it fits the game feel I want. Even if my mechanics are different, I'm like, okay, I look to like Band of Blades because it does like you're playing two characters, like you're playing characters that go out and also characters that are like base control. And I'm like, cool, I'm not gonna make a hack of that game, but like the intention is you are playing an army. A single character embodies a lot of an army, right? And that's like, what do you want players to feel? What do you want your players to feel? What do you want your players to feel is intent.
I am making a hack of Band of Blades. I'm gonna shove it into Magical Girls in Mecca.
Yes.
Do it.
I want it.
We're
Yesterday.
I'm not even.
All right, get on that, Imani.
I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I literally played Band of Blades last weekend, and everyone was just like, I don't really like this game, and I was like, it's perfectly niche for what I need to do. Yes, I'm going to take this game and shove it into my other game because imagine. But I'm like, as an aside to hype my own shit. Just imagine a game where you're the magical girl, but then you're also the commander of an army of mechs.
Got it.
Like, imagine that.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I might take Band of Blades and shove magical girls and giant robots into it.
That's
Amazing.
so much power. But that's it, right? When you have a one-liner game concept that makes your players already feel something before they've even played it, you know you're onto something.
Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, so when I was making, so again, hyping my own shit. Sorry, I do this a lot. I don't mean
Do
to.
it.
But in terms of when I was making 26 games in 52 weeks, every single one of those games started off with a tweet-length description of what I wanted because all I needed to do was, can I tweet this? Can I tweet this? And it's just like, hold on a second. Can I find it?
Wait, Simon, were you
Anyway.
gonna say something?
Yeah, say something while I look for this thing.
Oh, I was sort of thinking we're sort of joking in general about like steal this. Like that is true. Hacking games ultimately is taking an idea that someone else has already created and taking it and then using it for your own purposes. Whether that is the game itself, the mechanic that you're literally like lifting out and dropping in and then modifying, or again, as Ajay is saying, as I'm saying, so like the ethos, right, of something. You're taking the design principle of here's what we're doing with this game, or like here's the concept for the game. This is what Viditya was saying with like Band of Blades. Like, don't take the game mechanic, take the idea of the game, make it a troop game like Ars Magica or something like that, right? Like you can borrow those things, but these are all like this is sampling, right? Remixing to use the term of the phrasing that's in the panel. It's like it is stealing and it's also sampling. We're paying tribute to something, and there's something about that's sort of a bigger picture thing that I want to make sure we don't miss, which is ascribing history to those things and giving credit where credit is due. We're talking about remixing. I love hip hop. I love drum and bass. The genres would not exist without one clip of drums from Amen Brother by the Winstons. The Amen break. You've heard it before. You look it up. You go to YouTube right now. You look up the Amen break. You will have like, I've heard that somewhere, whether it's sped up, whether it's slowed down. It's everywhere. The drummer made no money off of that. The Winstons never made any royalties off of that. The drummer himself was like, listen, by the end of his life, I'm just glad that I changed music. Now, I don't know if I believe him 100%, but like, I would feel honored to do that. But I would want, if someone has built a genre off of my style, off of my original content, I would want someone to give me some props for that. And like, we're doing it as we're talking about these games, like, hey, I took this dice math, I took this game principle. That's great. Everyone should be doing this. Every game deserves to have a ludography as much as every research book has a bibliography of like, here's my game, here's where my game's DNA comes from. Like, we took a sample from this track and we put it in this track, and you recognize it and you go, oh dang, they took that song that I didn't really like before and they turned it into this sweet beat. You know, everyone has heard that one sometimes I get a good feeling. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But and that's like the D20 plus modifier of music in a way. But if you're not giving props, you think you're doing yourself a disservice and your players a disservice, because then those people if I put in one of my games, and I have done this, like this mechanic comes from this game. This idea comes from this game. Then the player who reads that book is like, oh, dang, I really like how that works. I like how Cartel does XP as keys. And so there's no XP, like you're working to get a drive. And I see that's mentioned in this game. Oh, maybe I should look at that game and see where it came from. Then that person plays that game, and then they open their minds to a new set of ideas, and you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. So we're like leaving behind these like thinking tracks for people, to borrow another idea from education. Like, here's a piece that we took, here's why we took it, here's where you can find it originally. Go off, and then you become a game designer yourself, because you're going out and you're taking that piece and you're finding out where it came from, and then thinking, whoa, what if I made a game like that? Or like, could I put that into a game I'm already playing? If you've house ruled, you've already game designed, right? So like, and you can house rule in game mechanics from other games. So that's remixing is more than just like, well, let me borrow this idea and like throw it in my game. It's like the big brain blast of like, how do you look at that, at hacking as a mindset, I think is vital.
Also, like I will say that in every game that I've made that's more than a page long, with the exception of the For the Queen game I made, I will put at the end of my game references, inspirations, and like things that I use to make this game, because I want you to look at my game and be like, oh, I know this thing. Where is it from? And I may not put like an exact footnote to the exact game. It's the end of the book or the front of the book, depending on which game it is. I have put literally this bit. I'm writing a game called Visits in the Dark. I'm taking Curse of Strahd and making it better. I'm taking Curse of Strahd and Blades in the Dark and shoving them together and being like, have a baby, it's gonna be fine. Like,
what a tagline.
But yeah,
that's a declaration of war. That ain't a tagline.
But like, I put that in the book. Like, you could, so if you look at this, like, this looks familiar. Yes, this is familiar. Also, Resident Evil.
What about Resi Evil?
I'm putting Resident Evil, the movies, not the games.
Okay.
That's part of my world building setting thing that I'm doing. So it's Resident Evil, Blades in the Dark, and Curse of Strahd in a game.
Yeah, I think like there's something really fun about oh my god, we're going off on a tangent. I'm sorry. I'm like,
yes, I'm sorry.
But like, no. It's because I'm like, there's something about like your pitch of like, you know, like, oh, it's X plus Y, but with Z is like kind of this intent of like, you know, knowing like where your influences come from, like knowing the media you come from. I know like every fucking game I make, I can reference Cowboy Bebop was an inspiration for this in some form or another. Like whether it's like, oh, Cowboy Bebop is the inspiration because like I love mixing genres. Like it's space and western, it's western and jazz. It's you know what I mean? Like that's or whatever. And like I think that's like it's important. I often forget to make to cite my work sometimes, and I feel really bad about that. But like it's also because I like to think you know, like I'm pretty open about what my influences are when it comes to the design itself.
Well, and no offense, but like you're an indie designer. It's not like you're a AAA company that has like tens of thousands of dollars and hours and hundreds of hours of play testing and like tons of money and energy behind you. You know, like indie developers, I think, are allowed to make a few mistakes every now and again when you're like pushing out a major product. It's far less excusable.
Yeah.
Like the other thing too is the other reason why I also keep a list of references of things that I'm referencing in my game, so I don't lose the track of the train of thought, because you can't tell I will lose the train of thought so quickly and so fast it's not even funny. So I have to keep a list of things that I'm referencing. So I'm like, okay, this is my thing that I'm doing. Yeah. This is the thing I'm doing.
I definitely have to do that actually, like more often. I mentioned Space Goblins, but like I just finished writing up all my inspirations for Space Goblins because I was like, well, that was kickstarted. It's going out to people outside of my usual circle. I definitely want to make sure that it is like cited properly. because it does take a lot of like at least small inspiration from many different games that I've played. So yeah, no, it's a very important part of this.
Also, coming from a film and TV background, this as an aside, the reason why I do it's like this plus this is because when you're pitching your TV show, pitching your movie, pitching your thing to an executive, they don't care about your actual thing. They care about the other thing that's like your thing that's made them money. So that's how I think about everything else I've already done. And literally, it's like this thing and this other thing, but slightly different. And this is the thing that's previously made you money. So I already know the audience is there for the thing that I made and that they like it. So that's why I do it's like this plus this, but with a little bit of that.
That investment level pitch is important though, because that works on regular players too.
Yes.
It's a great way to draw someone into what you're saying, into the conversation. You say something that they like, and they're paying attention because it means something to them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, intent, right? Like, how do you want players to feel? How do you want players to engage with your text and your mechanics and your world? It's very easy to the easiest way to do that, I honestly feel, is right at the top of your game, or like right at the back of the game, or like, someplace where they can immediately see, my game it's like, take Cowboy Bebop meets Gundam, or like Cowboy Bebop meets Nausicaa meets Breath of the Wild. And you're like, what? And they're like, that's fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but it gets people thinking about that. I think like wearing your, I think another kind of underlying thing about this is like, like nothing is wholly original, and you should never feel bad about that. In fact, like you should embrace that, because then people like connect with your game a lot more. People connect with like, if you're going into a game knowing that you're going to have like bombastic combat from like, or like bombastic fight scenes from like Gurren Lagann, right? Then they're going to play into that. They're going to know that that's what like the narrative wants. You're going to have players. It's my like biggest problem with D&D, where it's like every table is so different, because D&D is such a vastly like kind of like generic fantasy to its own degree, where it's like, okay, well, like what are you? Like, are you Lord of the Rings? Are you Monty Python? The game doesn't really tell you. It has references in the back, but if you even look at the references, you're like, these are all over the place.
Yeah,
absolutely. This means absolutely nothing.
This means absolutely. It's like Earthsea is right there next to Lord of the Rings, and I'm like,
right.
Huh?
As opposed to some other indie games that have like a touchstone list at the top that's like, here's the 3 movies that you should watch, here's the like 2 albums, and like 1 video game.
Playlist. I have a Spotify playlist for you.
Some games just have like, especially if they're like anime inspired games or have like anime into them, they'll be like, this is the theme song of the game, like just straight up, like your opening and your ending are these 2 songs. And I love that, because I'm like, oh, I'm in, like my brain is there. I'm ready to engage with these mechanics in the narrative you want. Like that's like a big kind of, there are 2 circles that you as a designer need to be building bridges for, and that's like a really big one.
Also, it helps. So for my first game that I ever made was for Tropes Jam, which I hope we have another one. I don't know if we're gonna have one. Find out from POC and TTRPG. Make them like be like.
It's on the timeline.
Okay. Anyway, so my first game was built for a trope jam. So it was like take a trope and build the game, and that was the intent. And I picked Newshound. The idea of Nancy Drew meets Lois Lane, Veronica Mars. Those are who I want you to think of when you play this game. That was my hardcore intent, and every game I've made since then has been the exact same train of thought. It's like, take a thing and be like, I want you to feel and think like this about this thing. Every single time. It's just like, Magic Girls and Giant Robots. I want you to think Sailor Moon and Gundam Wing. Not Symphogear. Fuck Symphogear. It's fine, but that's not the anime I want you to think of when I think of Magic Girls and Giant Robots.
I think we've pivoted that intentionality into the inspirations that you draw from. So I think if you are ready as panelists, we've got some questions that kind of lean right into that.
Yes.
Yeah,
cool.
Go for it.
We'll start semi-spicy, but I want to hear the positive feedback from you in terms of Idiot Sage says, I think stealing the soul of a concept is really value added, especially when you design from a different perspective or space. Question being, do you find the indie community is acceptable of this? Have any of you ever had conflict because of this? This is from another designer or other team.
Like stealing the vibe of a different game?
Yeah. So I have to assume we're talking about the indie game design community and probably collaborations or like the similarities?
I have a story. I have two stories. Does anyone have anything before I go on this not tangent?
Run with it.
Run.
Okay, so
Go.
first, one of the games that I made, and I cannot for the life of me, and I feel so bad because I cannot remember who it was. It might be Pamu. I made a game called It's Dangerous to Go Alone, Take This. And the general principle of this game, the entire idea of this game, is you pull things from your bag and you go on an adventure. It's meant to be played at a convention or like at a theme park or like when you're on the go, not in your house. And I swear to God, I tweeted this entire thread about this game. On Twitter. And I was like, I know someone else had this thought before me. And I finally figured it out. I'm pretty sure it's Pamu posted it or index card game jam thing or whatever.
Mhm.
And so I messaged them. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I stole your game. I didn't mean to steal your game. I forgot. I don't own their game, but like I couldn't remember where I had gotten this idea from. And they were like, no, it's totally cool. It's totally fine. Go for it. Your game is vastly different from my game, even though it's like the same general idea of it's dangerous to go alone, take this. Like, which is a Zelda joke because we're nerds. But then the second part of that is I come from a long line of fandom, and by fandom I mean the internet of fan fiction. And if I hear one more gosh darn child, and it's always a child, say you stole my fanfic idea, no, I didn't. No one has had a single original idea in your entire life. Stop thinking.
I've read fan fiction older than
my
you.
I have.
Oh God.
I've read fan fiction older than you. And so my point is, when it comes to people complaining like within like the TTRPG space about someone stealing their idea or like muscling in on their concept, if pyramids can exist in Egypt and in South America, trust me when I tell you, no one had an original thought in their head. Like
Except Mary Shelley.
I think except Mary Shelley.
Shelley.
If I can have another
Please.
little anecdote, something that gave me real, like, actual straight up life and fire in my soul to continue to make games, and this is my big PSA to everybody out here who is listening. I had a weird bad experience one of the first times I ever talked to any like major person in an industry at a convention who kind of was like, hey, I was like, I'm new. I was starting to learn about, I want to make tabletop games. I'm in college. I kind of want to do it as a profession. And they kind of were just like, no, like, don't, like, I said, like, do you have any advice on how to do this professionally? And they just kind of said, don't. Like, and laughed about it. Right.
Oh yeah.
But then, like, so that was like, oh no. But then I had another really wonderful interaction with, I started working on my thesis, Space Between Stars. You should read it. It's very good. I was talking to Evan, I forgot their last name, but they made Questlandia and Noralandia, wonderful designer. And at a convention, and I bought Questlandia. I read it. I was like, oh shit, this is really great. And I had a very wonderful conversation with him. And I read it overnight. I went back to the convention the next day and I go, oh no, like, I love your game. You've done a lot of things that like you've actually like you've done a lot of the things that are in my game in Space Between Stars. Like, and it was Evan Rowland. Thank you. I was like, oh no, like, I was like reading it and I'm like, it's super inspired, but also like, oh, like you already published a game that had a lot of ideas that I thought I came up with or like was making in my own game. And everyone just kind of looks at me and goes like, yo, that's like really great to hear. It means that we both had really good ideas. Like, I'm glad that it's like hearing you say that means that it's like my game is better. Like, I feel I'm more confident that my game's good because you came up with similar concepts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that like was really important to me as a designer to kind of know, hey, as a community, like to build up a community of designers, to build up a community of artists, don't punch down, don't pull up ladders, be there for another, right? Like, so if somebody, if there is like a budding up of the soul of ideas and projects, hey, like what if maybe focus on like what is different about it, right? Like what are you doing that isn't being tackled from some other thing? Or even like, you can have two games that are based off of Bionicle, but like they can be vastly different games because you're trying to tackle different things on the subject, right? Just like there can't be one Bionicle game on the internet. There should be many Bionicle games on the internet. But that's just my soapbox. And yeah, so that's kind of my little story to kind of say that, or it's important. I think it's good. It shows a lot about a community.
And like, even if you like steal the vibe of a game, it's not going to be the same game. Like if Viditya made a Bionicle game, and then I read up my Bionicle and I made a Bionicle game, they're gonna be different games because Viditya cares about different things than I do. You know,
So
like
from a professional
exactly.
standpoint, yes, artists can be inspired by the same concept and make things independently. But I think at the heart of it, how do you compose yourself or communicate as professionals if you know or run across someone where the vibes are similar in the game design?
Use
I
your
trade
words.
notes.
Yeah,
Use your words.
I think it's prudent for either party to be respectful and to acknowledge that you're treading similar waters. Because as Viditya was saying, like you don't want to, I think it's very unprofessional, frankly, to punch down and to pull the ladder up and say, well, I've already done this. If you go to a designer who is making a game for the first time, even a new design, imagine being, and many of you in the chat probably are, new designers who have never made a game before or are in the process of making a game or have never published one before, and someone comes up to you in the industry who has one game published or hundreds of games published. It doesn't matter. They tell you, well, excuse me, you can't make that game because I've already done it. Or I've already made a game that's on this theme. And so I'd really appreciate it if you would just sort of change your theme. I'm sure you can do that. Or if you change the mechanics or whatever. It's incredibly disrespectful as a designer to do that to somebody else and think to be so bold that you are the only person who has ever had that idea. As we've said, there are no like truly original ideas. We're sort of borrowing from a collective unconscious, from our inspirations. Convergent design does exist. And at the same time, there are things that happen where like someone takes an idea and just forgets to attribute it, and that in academia can cause you a lot of problems. Professionally, in game design, it's a little more nebulous, but I think the landmine that you're potentially stepping on is just as deadly. And so if you, the designer, see someone is making a game in your space, I think it behooves you to reach out and say, hey, this is really cool. I'm excited to see what you do with the idea. Rather than say, hey, here's my game, I've already written it, and that sends a message to the person that they shouldn't do it or that your game is somehow better, even if it is not your intention. And if you are a designer who is playing in similar waters to someone, you can say, listen, I was really inspired by your game. I'd love to make something that builds on that, or like, I'm interested in trying to hack it. Like if someone came up to me and was like, I want to take your LARP system and modify it, like, great. Here are the legal things that I want from you, like to sort of make sure that we're both feeling like our works are being presented in a way that we're in a light that we're both happy with, but also you giving that enthusiasm to that person should make them feel good about their work, and maybe they can help you piece things together on your end.
Big truths there. So I think that's a very poignant thesis statement for this Everything is Remix panel. Like what you all are doing by speaking here is trying to pivot the conversation and normalize opening up lines of communication, right? Art is not originality. It is how you control your creativity.
Yeah.
That leads into another thought. I'm gonna keep on steamrolling through these questions. Andreas from Metal Weave Games. Hello.
Yo!
Oh, hey.
So this is a crunchy question relative to game design. Okay. Thoughts on system licensing. What gets you to use a system? What are your thoughts for licensing your own system?
Clarity of the license.
Yeah.
Genesis had unclear licensing, and that single-handedly made me make my own system.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, I'm not a lawyer. I have no lawyer friend because my lawyer friend decided to be an accountant. It's fine. But if I can't read it, if I can't look at it and read it and be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm not gonna touch it. Like, I need not small words, but small words. Don't like you can have a legalese version of your license, but have a game dev friendly version of your license as well. Because that's literally the only choice that I will make. I will choose what is easy. Like Forged in the Dark, I can read that document and be like, the first like 3 points I think in that document answer any questions that I have about what I can and cannot do with their system. Like,
Yeah.
I just put as small as word as possible. Do it. Like, explain it to me like I'm 5. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Creative Commons are usually pretty safe for this kind of thing. Honestly, we use Creative Commons. I believe Ajey, you do as well.
Yeah.
The nice thing about those is if you go to their website, they kind of lay it out in a plain language, kind of how does this work? What can you do with it? What can't you do with it? Kind of since there are multiple parts of the question. What makes you willing to use a license? And I think from a design perspective too, it's very important to understand what the game that you might be using that license for. Like, what is it for? We talked earlier about how with the D20 system, it was. You might almost say that the D20 system was there to make money, right? And that this is D&D, it owns the market. If you want to use this license, then you too can make money piggybacking off this thing that owns everything. But if that, I think it's very important to go beyond that and ask too what fits. If I'm going to license someone else's system to make my own product, I need to know that it does what I need it to do very well. So when looking at a system for license, I personally would say look at know very well what you're trying to accomplish, and then it goes back to that. What about all those other people who've also tried to do what you've done? Because they are there. They exist everywhere. People have tried to do what you are trying to do. Maybe not in the exact same flavor or shade, but you can find stuff. And then with that license, it's if you're confident that they've really achieved what you wanted to do, then absolutely go for it. That is a good use of license. A good use of someone else's work that will enhance your own work.
Yeah.
Dig it. Love it. Licensing. Yeah. Game design is easy in the artistic standpoint, but then when you have to like really commit to making it a big person business and doing the legalese, that's a little intimidating.
That's why I make my own system.
I spent someone very kind and wonderful whose name I've now forgotten. I think it's like Valentina. Yeah, I literally can't remember their name. I'll remember it later and I'll find the chart. Made a chart of what you can using open game license for 5e or 3.5, 5e, Pathfinder 1e, Starfinder, like all the big ones. Like a chart saying the ones you can, what you can do and where you can't do with these licenses, like a red with check marks and X's. Then you can do this, you can't do that, you can do this, you can't do that. Because like they're a lawyer who just made it like this is the easiest way I can figure out how to display this information to people who don't know how to read this like 300-page document. It's not really 300 pages, but 20-something-page document. That's like 2 columns of like 0.12 font.
Yeah, the major corporations, they're not going to make that easy for you because they want to get their cut. And I know I can basically guarantee that Hasbro's lawyers are not okay with Pathfinder happening again. So
no, they are.
That will not fly, and they will make sure of that.
Is it bad advice to say words are copyrighted but mechanics aren't? Like.
No, I think
you're not wrong.
I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah.
But that does get into the territory about like respect.
Yes, of course.
Like, like it is true that you can't copyright the rules of a game system. And if you just want to take them wholesale and put them in something else, fine. But I think we keep harping on intentionality because I think it's the core of game design, whether you're hacking something or not, whether you're building it from the ground up or not. Is that if you're doing it, again, who is it for? Is it for your home group Totally. Take a game, strip the rules out, and reskin whatever you want and do whatever. Take 50 different games, just smash them together. It's fine. But the minute you start selling it, you'd better have a good reason for doing what you did. Back it all up, cite your sources, know where the bodies are buried.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, people will come sniffing for it, and you do not want that.
If people think you're like stealing their flow, it will look bad.
Yeah.
And they will make a mess of it.
Like, and the thing about it is too, so someone else said this on a different panel that I was like watching or I was in, I don't remember. But like the fastest way to find out that you've done something wrong on the internet is post it on the internet. Like that is literally you will find out because someone will see it and be like, no, you robbed, you stole, you like I make the joke.
Sorry, go on.
I make the joke that the English language took a bunch of other languages in back alleyways and beat them up and stole the parts that it cared about. Don't do that to games. Like, don't do that unless you're like the English language.
Mm-hmm. If you follow me on Twitter, I often just go, "Hey, Neon Pirates, is that a thing?" Like, I'll like just ask that, and then if enough people go, "What? That sounds cool," and I'm like, "All right, it's not a thing yet. I could do it."
It's my thing now.
It's my thing now. I said it. It's my tweet.
Yeah, that's how copywriting and trademarking works. You say it out loud, and it's yours.
Is that a thing? This is my thing. It's my thing now.
Yeah, you're crowdsourcing storyboarding, or sometimes people will pivot and make that a game jam, and that's the epitome of like, here is a thing, it's my thing, but I want it to be your thing. I want to see how you do it.
I mean, like that's what Attack and Dethrone God was. It started as a meme, and then someone was like, two people were like, "What if that was a game jam?"
What if that was a game jam?
Turn-based tactics jam. That's how that happened. TTRPGs. I don't know how no one.
When does it start?
September next month. And 1 month and 6 days from now.
Oh, it is August now.
Yeah, it is August.
I'm throwing Thunderbolt in that.
Okay. I think this is a good one. So Egan Vegan had asked something I see on Twitter a lot from those of us who are just starting to get into tabletop RPG design.
Hell site, leave.
There are choices. Some choices are heavy with benefits and costs. We make those choices. Question is, where's the line, if any, between homebrew rules, hacks, and building your own system?
There is
so
no
essentially
line.
Summarize what we're doing here.
There is no line. There's no line. Like I think in the last time we had this panel, someone asked a similar question. Like the line is intent. That is where I'm gonna draw the line. I think that's where I drew the line last time too. Like, do you intend to make a whole system, or are you just fixing the things that are broken in the system that you like? Like
caveat to that, I would add though, if you're at the point where you've replaced about, I would say generously about 40% of the game, you're really starting to get into that territory, whether you meant to do 60? That or not. It's kind of that ship of Theseus idea where it's like if they're and you can quibble about the percentage all you want, but understand that if you have a game and you've had to replace a majority of it to do what you want, you're in making your own game territory now. I'm sorry, you've done this to yourself.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to
the party. Empty your wallet because you're not allowed to have money anymore. You're in this. Yeah. Sorry.
I think throw away all your friends too. They don't want to hear you talk about your damn game anymore. I mean, on a serious
Ajey, talk about bold. No, sorry, go on.
Fuck you. On a serious question though, like if on that like difference between like homebrew and a new system, like ask yourself, is Flying Circus by Erica Chappell powered by the Apocalypse game? Because she swapped out all the moves, she added on a bunch of extra mechanics. There are no D6s anymore, they're D10s. Like, at what point does it stop being a PBTA game? When does it start becoming Erica Chappell just wrote a game on her own?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that line is. That
line
is very fuzzy.
To complicate the waters, I mean, the Bakers have been on record by saying that PBTA is an aesthetic more than a system, if anything. So, like, as long as it is still following the core principles of design, then it doesn't have to use 2d6. I mean, Quietus, that's Forge in the Dark, but that's a strong hack of like PBTA that completely changes the game. Or Undying. Undying is technically a powered by the Apocalypse vampire game that doesn't use dice. So if PBTA has to be 2d6, you can direct people and add your stat. You can direct people to Undying and be like, well, explain what this is and why it has that label slapped onto it. I think would it come to gently push back against the idea that there is no line. Personally, I think there is a line, but it becomes a point where there is money and work coming in from the game. As soon as money starts changing hands, then you're no longer really homebrew. Like there is a line, right? Homebrew, I think for me, is you've made something and you're using it for your own personal group.
Yeah.
And there's homebrew content for third party content for games, which is like that is homebrew, but I think that is there is an expectation that more care has gone into some of it if it's especially published. A hack itself, you're taking a game and you're modifying it, building a game from the ground up. You're probably hacking games to do that, but it is possible to write a game from whole cloth. It's disingenuous to say that like, well, every game is a hack of something else. Like you're taking ideas maybe, but like, did Epidaya Ravakul hack an existing game when he put a Jenga tower in Dread for the first time? Like it is possible to blend things and to get into splitting hairs. Like, is that a hack of Jenga? Like that then you're doing is a hot dog a sandwich level of like minutia splitting that
we're
really
not getting
doesn't
into that.
solve any problems. It doesn't like get into the details,
I'll
sandwiches.
I'll do like 2 examples of like games that I think are a good kind of fuzzy line, right? And even like talking to the creators, I know this is their like intent. I'm sorry to say Street Magic is its own game, even though it is like built off of a lot of the DNA of Microscope. I know like Kara doesn't actually like, I'm speaking for them to a degree, but like we've talked about, it's like Kara doesn't think that I'm sorry to say Street Magic is a Microscope hack. It is not. It is its own game, even though its play structure is very similar. And like what the original concept would be considered a hack, like what it's talking about, what it's doing, all this stuff is very different from Microscope. And similarly, like Wander Home is not a belonging inside belonging game. Like J Dragon's Wander Home, it's coming out to Kickstarter in like 3 days, is not a belonging outside belonging game, even though like that's kind of what Jay's known for. I know like a lot of people are going to call it that because it has a lot of that DNA, but it is not. Like Jay explicitly is like, it's not necessarily, right? And I think like labels are kind of important in that degree as well, of like, you like calling something PBTA to slap the label on it is like a choice in the same way of saying, well, it's PBTA inspired, but I'm not going to slap PBTA on it. You know what I mean? And there's like, there's that gray line. And those 2 games I like to use as an example for that.
I mean, another example of a gray line is kind of Bolt. Like, are you willing to say, because like the joke is that I Pathfinder to Genesis.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you willing to call Bolt a Genesis hack? Maybe
Are
not.
you?
That's I think that's the true core of this, right? I think is it a game design? Is it a hack?
He is not.
For legal reasons, I am not.
Right. But I think if you want to be a game designer, then you need to make your intention known, and that's where it is. So you, Ajay, the game designer, makes that line and says it is not a hack, but it is inspired by Genesis.
The reason for that is the lawyers. I told the lawyers at Asmodeus that this is not a hack of Genesis.
Also, on a side, on a TV, coming at this from a TV person point of view, the Writers Guild actually has like literal rules for when something no longer belongs to the original creator. Like how much work you have to put in something for no longer belongs to the they're literally like lawyers. Like if lawyers got involved with something,
there is a line.
There's a line. There's a literal line. There's like a word. Like I was joking about, it's like 60%, but like it's not like 60%. It's like literally one of my college professors. His job was an arbitrator between people arguing over who wrote like the Elmo movie for Sesame Street. Like who wrote that movie? Because apparently they went through 3 different writers, and they couldn't determine who was getting first credit on that movie. It's like, at what point is it no longer yours? Because we basically stripped everything that you've done from this movie and put it into something else. So I guess when it comes to hacks versus original game, when you no longer see the original structure of the building that you were in, and it's now like a totally different building, then it's something else. You tore the building down and built a new building. It might be in the same spot, but it's not the same building anymore.
I think it's important to acknowledge too, to just because of how copyright and all of that interact with games and game mechanics, like this space is very unique in that regard, and that's why I think you see a lot of things like these licenses and all of that. I almost want to recommend that this question is in part a branding thing. You can quibble over details as much as you want, but I think honestly, again, with that intentionality that we keep hammering for very good reason, how do you see yourself? Are you a hack? Then yeah, go ahead and call yourself that. Are you your
don't call
own
yourself a
thing?
hack.
Then yeah,
absolutely a hack.
I'm entirely a hack.
Yeah,
Why are we
we're
on
all
the
hacks.
panel?
But yeah, if you believe your system to be a hack of an existing system and you want to tie yourself to that brand, then do that, and you're probably right. If you want to say you are your own thing, and here are some things that inspired you, do that, and you're probably right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I dig it. From a fan perspective, I am very generous and I call you all game designers. Even when you're talking about your hacks or your homebrews, I already think you're game designers. And
Absolutely.
me as a not game designer, I have a tool set where I'm like, I will treat you like a game designer until you treat yourself like a game designer, and I'll give you the know-how and the business in order to make those games happen.
Yes.
I TA'd intro to game design classes, and that was kind of like my whole thing. I was not the best TA, to be perfectly frank, but like it was a lot of me going like just reassuring people that it's like, hey, this is you're already there, like you're doing it. You're a game designer. You've made like a tiny little abstract strategy game, or not even. Like one of the first assignments is like fucking add a rule to tic-tac-toe. Add one rule to tic-tac-toe. Make the grid longer. You can put two things, like just whatever. And I'm like, cool, you're a game designer now. Like you can say you've done it.
It's a fascinating exercise, by the way.
It's very fun.
It's very interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. Or like add a rule to war. Hell, like there you go. Your rule could be like every time you do play tic-tac-toe, you have to tell a story. And like there you go, you've made
that would be an amazing lyric game.
There's your mechanic.
There's a really good Sad Mech Jam game that uses tic-tac-toe as a framing for a Gundam thing. It's very good. I'll find it.
Sad Mech Jam, that's a really good. Like so much came out of that too.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Now, do another question?
Yes, one last question, and it's a similar vein of game design. What are y'all's thoughts on the time requirements that game design might entail? Specifically, not just in a mechanical design respect, but things like art, graphic design, editing, like the whole shebang.
Oh
boy.
no.
Okay, all right. You know what? That was a can of worms. I'm gonna rein it in before you even start. It can be as long or as short as you want it to be from start to finish.
Yeah.
But the salient part of this is how does one negotiate those time requirements where, for example, you have a demanding day job or other time-sensitive demands?
I can answer that.
Take your time.
No, take your time. I mean, yes, take your time. But also, here's the thing. In the month of December, I was unemployed. I had no job, so I had nothing else to do with my time. So I spent 5 hours every day, 5 days, not every day, 5 days a week, streaming myself working on a game. I built a board game. I built a prototype of a board game in a month. If you want it, you'll make time. It's one of those things that it's true for any industry, not just specifically game design. If you really, 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 really want it, you will make it work. Like if there's a will, there's a way. Type you will will it into existence if you really, really want it. Is my opinion. It's my answer to that question.
Do you mind if I jump in here? My background wise, I work full time. I'm in supply chain, so I've built a pretty nice career for myself, and I use that to fund my system. I work full time. For a while, I was commuting about 3 hours a day. And I was also working for a defense company, and it was like the most soul-sucking thing in the world. And that's really hard. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that chasing this dream can be exhausting and difficult. Um, I'm not going to say that it requires a certain personality or a certain mindset, because I think that's selling it short. What it does require is a level of understanding and dedication, and also forgiveness for yourself,
Absolutely.
because you
Mhm.
will invariably fail to meet your own standards all the time, and it will be absolutely devastating to you. Whatever those standards you set, I guarantee you they are going to be above and beyond what you are actually capable of doing, because you in your mind are much greater than you in reality. And we tend not to expect that we need time to relax, to laugh, to live life a little. We think, oh, I can just grind this out. You can't. It's impossible. Like, humans are not wired to be that. So what I would say, as someone who has worked a very demanding schedule and still, done this, and not necessarily to the degree that I wanted to be able to, but I still pressed forward even when I was in a bad situation. Forgive yourself for the failures that you think you have committed, because they're truly not failures. They're just uh, inability to meet your own unrealistic expectations. Like, just treat your brain like your asshole boss who's telling you to do 5 things in an hour, and that that's physically impossible. Your brain is the same way, so just understand that and accept that and forgive yourself. And in that, find time and try and schedule it so that you have a space where your brain is saying, okay, this is the time that I have dedicated to working on this thing. Don't feel like you have to always stick to that schedule, but make an effort every time that comes up to do something. And if you don't really have that energy that day, maybe do a little of it, just so you feel like you've moved forward, and then rest. you know understand your body's needs, your mind's needs, and forgive yourself for that, and just do what you need to do.
Absolutely. I mean, like don't only do your big game project. Like,
Baby things.
yeah, it's like I could very much be in a situation where all I do is play Bolt. I'm actually pretty close to that situation right now. Like, almost always only play Bolt. But I shouldn't. I should be playing other stuff too. I should be having a life outside of this project. I don't want to. You shouldn't put yourself into a hole of your own work. You should still be like the stuff I do for like reviewing other people's games. The fact that I still want to play Lancer. Someday I will play Lancer.
Someday.
We'll put together a Lancer game. We'll do that. Just
I'll GM that shit. I will GM Lancer.
I'm holding you to it. No, you said it. I'm holding you to it. It's now true.
All right, Donskis. Like, that's gonna be a thing, because like if you want to make like the next great Cyberpunk game, don't just play that game. Don't even just play Cyberpunk games. Like, play other stuff. Occasionally join some random game jam, like make some bookmark game or something. Like, switch things up. Like, keep things like fresh. Because otherwise you'll burn yourself out hard. Like, for a while, I did nothing but write Bolt in my free time. I burnt myself out. I haven't written Bolt mechanics in 2 months.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll say, so earlier I said I spent 5 days a week for 5 hours for an entire month working on a game. I haven't touched that game since I did that. Like I made it, it exists, I know it works because I playtested it right after I built it, and I touched it in January and I haven't looked at it since. Like I occasionally will think about it and I'll make a note to myself, but I haven't really worked on it because I'm so not sick of the game, but I'm so tired of having worked on it for so long that I'm not gonna call it burnout because I think about it all the time. I lost the motivation to do anything with it right this minute, and I'll come back to it later. But that's the other thing. Also understand that you can come back to things later. It's like I stream game dev stuff online and to hold myself accountable to other people to do things. But not everyone is me. Not everyone needs that like overwhelming peer pressure to do things. Don't let the peer pressure get to you. You can just quietly work on things in the background and not tell anyone. Like it's okay. Like
not everything is content, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's a very dangerous mindset to get yourself in. Is like, well, if I'm working on something, then I should be sharing it with people, because how will they know that I'm working on a game if I don't tell them that I'm working on a game? But sometimes that comes back to bite you because you've made yourself accountable for something. Suddenly people become expectant that they will hear an update about a project that you're working on, or I'm going to put this in the world, and you say that, and maybe you don't get to finish the project by the end of the year. Well, it's fine. Nothing bad happened as a result of it. You just didn't meet your goal. But you may find that other people hold you to that expectation, or you're holding it to yourself. I think in terms of just managing it, like I'll share a personal story for me where I've been a game designer when I've been unemployed and have no other prospects. I've been a game designer when I was in graduate school, not only working on a thesis project for a Master's of Education degree, but also doing student teaching at a local high school, teaching English classes during the day, and also working an evening job at a after-school program in the same town. And making games and running a LARP, running a weekend game 4 times a year for 50 people. Both of those times, I don't know which of those was more challenging for me, frankly, because one thing, you have a very strict schedule where you're trying to get to, you're taking your classes, doing your homework, eating, spending time with your friends, dealing with your family, and still finding time to make your game. A game that really the stakes are very high, where everyone is expecting you to have product 4 times a year, and meetings about it. And at the same time, when you have nothing going on except a job hunt, or if you're taking time off, totally valid, you're working on your game in your spare time, but you're still seeing friends, eating, managing your own health. You have to make the time in some ways that can be more challenging because there is no set schedule you have to make for yourself. So being honest about what your time requirements are, I think is crucial. And making that time, if you clear it out, if you think, well, I don't have time to make my game, well, maybe you do if you take out half an hour of mindlessly scrolling Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or something that you do in the morning or in the evening. That could be 30 minutes that you spend consciously working on your game. For me, like I also contend with ADHD, and I've written many games and I've published fewer than that. But I think part of that for us as designers, we probably each have like a stack of files in Google Drive or wherever that's like unfinished ideas. And it can be very, very disheartening to look at that and say, look at how many games I haven't finished. And something that I personally have been trying to do with that is like ride the wave of saying, this is my fixation for now. I'm really interested in working on this game concept. I'll write a bunch of mechanics, and then I'll just lose it because that's just the way that my brain is wired. And to go to Austin's point about forgiveness, to forgive yourself for losing that interest because you're becoming more interested in something else. And then you can go back to it. And then when you start to accept that, you can go back and reframe this as not, look at how many things I haven't finished. You can look at it and say, oh my God, look at all these things that I made. Look at all of these game designs that I came up with. These are ideas. And sometimes the doing of the making of the idea is more important than making the finished product. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you have a 300-page hardcover heartbreaker to show off to people. Sometimes it can feel worlds better to have a dozen half-finished products that each have really beautiful ideas in them, or really exciting ideas, things that light your mind on fire when you're looking at that document and going back looking at it late at night and you go, damn, I wrote that rule. Like, I wrote this mechanic, or I wrote this game experience. Sometimes that is more satisfying than having the product. There are different methods. So like, not only who are you making your game for, that question includes you. Why are you making your game, and what is the goal?
100%. I will again argue that you're all game designers, all the viewers who are interested in game designing, who are working on things. Everyone in this panel is obviously a game designer. The problem is, do you want to be a published game designer? And that is a question to answer is, are you ready to project manage yourself? That's the only difference between a published game designer and a real game designer. Go ahead, Viditya.
It's just a small thing, because I know we're almost done with time, but small little bits of language for me really helped change my mind on stuff. I call a lot of my games sketches. Or like I say like, hey, I just like sketch something out. And this is because I have an artist's brain, where I'll go like, oh, this is just a sketch. And like in my head, that's like, okay, cool. It doesn't have to be finished. It's rough. It's just an idea, right? Because I attribute a lot of, I say game designers are artists all the time. It's just like a different form. And so it's like, keeping a sketchbook is very important to artists, because it's like, a sketchbook is not supposed to be finished. And similarly, a game sketch is not supposed to be finished. You could write out like just a couple of moves, right? And just be like, hey, these are just cool moves I thought of, right? Like maybe they're just small solo moves or whatever, but then like you can, like Simon was saying, you can go back and be like wowed by what you had come up with before. And that language just really helps me, helps like stop myself from getting hyper like worried or saddened that like, oh, I never actually went back to finish, my like Saturday morning dino game. And it's like, oh shit, like I wish I had come back to finish that. But whenever I find the doc, I go like, it's rough, it's a sketch, it's something I can always go back to, I don't mind.
And you can always take a sketch and go over it.
And like take it further later down. And then similarly, just another small point, because we brought up game jams. Game jams are literally meant to be there as proof of concepts. Like, it's wonderful that people take game jams to be like, I need a finished product at the end of it. But that is absolutely should never be your standard. A game jam is like in terms of like game culture, game making culture, jams are literally like, we've given ourselves little deadlines to stop ourselves from eternal production. You know what I mean? Stop ourselves from like intense stress.
It's like fuck around and find out.
Fuck around and find out. Like literally, it's like what is it, like a turn-based tactics jam? If you've never made a turn-based tactics game, don't fucking think you got to reinvent the wheel, get art, lay it out. By the end of this jam, toss out like a hex map with a few little things in a Google Doc.
12-point aerial.
Fucking do it. And like, that's really wonderful. Like, a game jam is a time for you to like
explore. An idea out there.
It is a time to explore, and it is a good way to like, break burnout. Just to be like, hey, 2 weeks, fuck it, I'll make a weird little tactics game. It's gonna be like, it's gonna be a PDF, and that's it, right? Yeah. I think that's important.
To borrow from the language of music briefly, like, because everything is a remix, right? Let's tie it back to hip hop, right? Everything in hip hop is like an album can be like a bunch of really solid tracks with like full on vocals and collaborations, and then a couple of skits in between or whatever, like the kind of old school format, or like maybe it's a more modern, like, here's my like 10 top 40 hits, right? But Jay Dilla made Donuts, and that changed.
Donuts is so good.
It changed music. It changed hip hop. And Donuts, the average track length is what? 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
It's a beat tape.
Half the tracks are like 30-second snippets attached to each other.
Right, they're concepts. Dilla changed the genre with a sketch, right?
Yeah,
and like pad. That is something that you can do, right? You don't have to be making full on like Midnight Marauders. You don't have to do Enter the 36 Chambers. You can do a beat tape as your
Everything
game.
Is remix. I gotta cut y'all off. That's it. We're here. We're at the 3 hours. You made it. Thank you all. I guarantee you, if you're a game designer, you're at least somewhere on the attention span spectrum here. Yes.
It becomes a special interest.
Give give me your links. Let's shout you out. I'm gonna finish off with Imani, since Imani, you've got some stuff going on panel wise.
Yes.
So why don't we start with Austin?
Austin McKenzie. I do Valor. If you love anime and you love getting mechanically rewarded for screaming at the table, come check us out. We are running a Gen Con sale on our store, which you can access through our main site, valorousgames.com, and our store NB link is there. So if you type in the word Gen Con as a promo code, and that is Gen capital G and capital C, one word, you will get $10 off either the ebook, the hardcover, or the hardcover ebook combo. So if you like what you heard about Valor, because I certainly spent enough time talking about it, gotta make sure I talk about Valor more than Ajey talks
Good
about
shit.
Bolt.
Oh,
I think he
on.
beat me
It's
this time.
Fucking on.
It's on, and I think I lost, but attempt for me. But yeah, check us out.
Excellent. Viditya, how about you?
Hi, yeah. I've been Viditya Validity. You find me on Twitter at Viditya Validity, and buy my games at vidityavalidity.itch.io. A lot of my games, I think, I think you can see what I was talking about in my games is something I'm very proud of. So if you should check them out. Also, support me on Patreon. I'm a game designer, and I do this. And we were talking about wanting to do these how do you balance work life and stuff like that. The more I can focus on game design as a thing, the more I can explore these concepts. Also, I think a pretty big thing. I have design consultant rates. So if you liked what I was saying, pay me to make your game better. Pay me to talk you through, and I really do mean it. It's we can sit down for a few hours and then just talk about your game design, talk about where you want to go. If you want to talk about what system you want to talk about, I'm here for you.
Same.
Yeah. So it's really cool. Thank you. That's about it.
Excellent. On that note, before I tell Ajey to plug their stuff, it is very important to us here at Huetopia that this panel was made because they wanted to talk about it, and we saw a demand that people needed to hear about game design. This was 3 hours of free content. Gen Con this year was free. Please, if you can throw $1 or whatever amount of support you can to your game designers, do so. If you can support
Jess
channels
and Imani worked
that
so
are
hard for
pushing
this.
Oh yeah.
MPOC people in representation and giving you all voices, please support us, support the game designers, do what you can to make this space for us, right? Ajey, tell us about Bolt.
I'm not going to talk about Bolt. In the spirit of everything is a remix, I'm going to talk about Bolt hacks. People to check out in terms of really sick Bolt hacks. Check out Exodus by Ben Warren for an exosuit game where you kick capitalists in the ass. Check out Saturn's Gate for hard sci-fi with a really sharp space combat system. Check out Jolt Flux by Omi Chun. Oh yeah. Saturn's Gate is written by the Astronomer on Twitter. Check out Jolt Flux by Omi Chun or Omi the Fool on Twitter for more of an OSR vibe, more of a weird esoteric story game vibe. What else is out there? Check out Lexi the Fae for an Animal Companions pack that I believe is coming out very soon. Check out Cass Once, and I think their name is, for a magic system based on tarot cards. And there are a bunch more of these hacks. One that I'm working on that's really fun is with Eldritch Crow, called Thunderbolt, which is a jet fighter hack. So there are bolt hacks happening. Please, if you have an inkling for weird action adventure bullshit nonsense, you can make it.
We're here for you.
Go fight, win all together.
I will.
Right?
I will give you the copy of the game for free to go hack it.
Beautiful.
Make your dreams come true.
Don't let your dreams be memes. Simon, where can we find you?
Yes, my name is Simon. You can find me on Twitter at Lucha Libris. You can check out some of my game designs at colorspraygames.itch.io, where I have a variety of tabletop things that were just released for free on Free RPG Day. If you already bought the bundle for racial justice and equality, you own one of my games. So thank you for that. If you want to play a game with me as part of the Magpie Games curated play program, I'm a professional GM for that. That's magpiegames.com/curated-play. Sign up and play with a bunch of great, fantastic GMs, including myself, games like Masks, Root, Bluebeard's Bride, all that good stuff. I am a voice actor for the Penumbra Podcast, which is a queer sci-fi and fantasy audio drama. If you want to see yourself represented in stories, that's at the Penumbra Pod on Twitter, thepennumbrapodcast.com. I'm a co-founder and co-director of Attaway LARP and the Enkindle Storytelling LARP group in Boston. That's attawaylarp.com to check that out. In addition, I am a streamer for a game called Unnatural Disasters that is on twitch.tv/allnerdshere Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. We play Monster of the Week with an all BIMPOC crew. And also Sundays, twitch.tv/allnerdshere, 3 p.m. Eastern. We play the Worldwide Wrestling RPG. If you like wrestling and feelings, check that out. Last but certainly not least, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, bright and early, please join me at twitch.tv/GenCon Mainstage for a interview between myself, Mark Diaz-Truman, and Brendan Conway of Magpie Games. I will be interviewing the two of them, talking about the process of creating Root, the role-playing game. Please join us for that conversation. It's sure to be a blast.
Wonderbar. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Imani, where are our last panels for the last day of Gen Con?
Okay, here, I do links in chat. Haha, I prepared.
Nailed it.
So write your first TTRPG. So you've written your first TTRPGs tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the fucking morning, which is 4 a.m. for me.
Yikes!
So you have no excuse why you're not going to show up, okay? And then later at 2 p.m., it's the only girl in the world being the only femme face at the table. It's me and a bunch of other wonderful femme people talking about being the only girl at the table. Officially.
It's a mood. It's a whole brand. I love it.
You can find me on twitch.tv/MargaretCatterTV. I stream game dev stuff, and then you can find me on Twitter at MCatterDev. You can find me on itch.io and Margaret Catter. And then you can also commission me like Viditya, only I have a fancy commission sheet to do various things like video editing, podcast editing, consulting. I'm not even kidding. I was prepared.
Imani is wildly talented.
I gotta do this.
Yeah, do this.
Hell yeah.
I do basically I overcommit myself and do too many things, but I do everything I do amazingly. So hire me.
Excellent. For Huetopia, I am Jess. I go by Burst of Hope on Twitter. I am so full of love. Today has been a very, very long day for me behind the scenes, but we have done so much. There is so much for each and every one of you to be proud of. We are finishing out our schedule at Huetopia in between Imani's panels. So we've got Beyond Evil playing a truly divisive PC here at Huetopia. That is tomorrow at 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And then Failing Forward. Why failing in game can be fun and how you spin the narrative. And that will be Sunday at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. EDT.
Yes, all the times I gave her EDT, by the way. 4 a.m. Pacific time for me.
Tragic.
Yes. So keep the conversation going on Twitter. Thank you for watching. If you want to stick around for a smidge more, I do believe our lovely producer Mariam is going to raid the none other than Critical Bard, who is doing also amazing things in terms of representation and being loud and proud in the tabletop industry. So go give him some love and stay safe. Make good choices. Go make games.
Hell yeah. Hydrated.
Yes. Hydration is important.
Yeah, make games, hydrate, and rest. Be kind to yourself.
Bye.
Bye.